Good evening and welcome to our Wednesday, February 22nd budget meeting. Call to order, moved by Sam McDonnell, seconded by Martin Lang. Be it resolved that the February 22nd, 2023 special meeting of the Township of South Glengarry now be opened at 5:33 p.m. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. The approval of the agenda. Moved by Martin Lang, seconded by Trevor Bougie. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry approve the agenda as circulated. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Approval of the minutes. We don't have to do that anymore. Okay, then we'll go into Section 5, presentations and delegations. 5A, the 2023 draft budget presentation. And if I may, just before we get there, I'd just like to survey the opinion of council. So we'll start with Councillor Bougie, and then we'll move to Councillor McDonnell, Councillor Jaworski, then Deputy Mayor Lang, and then myself. Do you have any outcome that you want to expect for this evening, percentage-wise or other, if you have any thoughts? Councillor Bougie?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I mean, the goal at the end of the day for me is to find efficiencies, and I feel like a number around 5% based on what I've looked at, and I mean, taking into account inflation is a huge weight on us for many different departments. Just seeing the CPI numbers coming in at 5.9 for the month before. There's projections for it to cool in the summer a little bit, but we have to go with what we know, and I would say, based on all the information, I would like to see a number around 5%.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McDonnell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess some expectations I'd have is I won't set a number, I'd like to say somewhere around the consumer price index. That would be ideal for myself. At the same time, taking into considerations our assessment has not changed, and we are facing a lot of overages and price increases like every other business and corporation out there. We're seeing a lot of inflation numbers around 6.9%, somewhere indicating up to 7%. So I'd like to keep it reined in around that, but myself just realistically acknowledging that we are facing some impressive inflation numbers.
Thank you, Councillor McDonnell. Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McDonald. Well, I guess where I would begin is that, this is our first view of the budget sort of as a whole. We've had, capital, we've had roads, we've had very fulsome discussions on those, but this is now our first opportunity to get more fulsome view of it. And so maybe similar to Councillor McDonnell, I don't have a specific number in mind because as I like to do, I haven't had a chance to do sort of a line-by-line analysis of the budget. So I certainly want to hear what staff have to present. But I would not want to exceed the 2022 annual average CPI, which I believe is 6.8. I certainly don't want to exceed that in terms of a tax rate. I think we've done a lot of good work, I think, in the last term of council to make some readjustments to how our residents are taxed. And certainly, I don't want to do anything that goes over consumer inflation because I think that's not respecting sort of the situation that we're in today with all the other inflationary pressures. But I'm very interested in hearing what staff has to say, and as we move through the process and see if there are other opportunities to bring it down beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jaworski. Deputy Mayor Lang?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Councillor Jaworski said she doesn't want to go above the inflation. I don't want to go below it. And I'll give you my reasons. Inflation, I think, was around 6.8% last year, but we know that the municipal inflation is higher. A lot of our costs, a big percentage of our costs for our roads and stuff are fuel. I mean, we know that we've already got our contract in for our dust suppressant, and it was over 20% higher than last year. We know our costs are higher than general inflation. So we have to respect the situation that our residents are in, but at the same time, we have to be realistic about what it costs us to carry on and do business. So I'm not looking to go 20% or anything. My thought is, you know, I'll say 6 to 8% is kind of where I'm looking at it at the moment, and that's having looked over, you know, the papers that we've got. I mean, we've had quite a bit of time to talk about and back and forth with the different members of our lead team, and we'll see what everybody comes out today. But that's kind of what I'm thinking now. But I'm interested to hear what staff has to say. I'm interested to hear what the rest of council has to say.
All right, I guess I call upon myself. I guess I started writing my own notes for myself, but that's kind of silly because I know my thoughts. So I'm more along the line of Deputy Mayor Lang. Inflation is something that we are experiencing. Just look at the American Fed's Ben Bernanke, because I always quote somebody who's wiser than you, 40 years. Right now is 40-year high of inflation, so we haven't seen this in a while. So the budgets that we're seeing in the last 4 years for council or the last 8 to 12 are different than the one here. I similarly say about 7 would be great. Looking at inflation of fuel and construction at 12, and then regular inflation at 5.9, you might even say 8.5, 9 could be a reasonable amount. Ideally, we don't want to go that high, but there are some thoughts towards that, and we do have to be cognizant of that as we think of this budget. It doesn't mean we have to go there, but just keep that in mind. I think it's important if and when we look at raising it at this amount, we have to be very cognizant of where we place those dollars. And if we go higher, I know the community does like its hard infrastructure, but we also have to look at how we supply our services, because I think the community does expect more of us, and more of us comes with more items. So I won't shy away from, I think a common thing would be, I am a smaller government gentleman, so I mean, that's what I represent to the community. I thought of this a lot last night, probably at least 8 times between 1:30 and 5:30, for sure. We have to be respectful of the pressures we put on staff. We have to be respectful of the taxation we take from the community. We have to be respectful of our relationships. So I'm very excited for the conversations we have. We might not always reach consensus on everything, but we will reach a majority, and we will support those budgets as they are. When it comes to you, Mr. Jane, what is the intention just for how we'll go through this presentation? Will you go through it and bring up the general manager appropriately? And then subsequently, I, like Councillor Jaworski, feel that at the end of this meeting, we will still have another meeting. The change of the budget, it was new to us, and we need some time to absorb it. Thank you very much for providing a lot of additional information and time to us. But I would like to, if there's questions that we ask that you don't know, we can come back at the next meeting, and I would encourage council to look through those that Excel document, and if you have questions in between now and then to, well, give some lead time, not the day before the next budget meeting, but let's set maybe 4 days before to give Mr. Jane an opportunity if you have questions after that. But how do you wish to run this meeting, the administrative side of this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So what I'd like to do today is go through a brief overview of the taxation, water, wastewater budgets, some of the market factors that are influencing the budget, talk a little bit about long-term debt and our reserves, and then I'd like to pass it off to the general managers to present their own budgets. And at that point, once every general manager has finished presenting, if council has any questions that they'd like to ask of the general managers, they can do so at that time.
Okay, and if I may highlight too, and maybe it's my wish, I guess, would be to the general managers and yourself, if there's a change of service, please do note it so that we're aware, because I think that's important for the public to have those conversations. And then I had something else, but it's gone. But that sounds great to me. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you. Through Mayor, question to you. Will you like questions after every section, or do you want us to hold till the end, or?
I think it would be prudent to do questions after every section, because it's kind of topical as we go through them. So then, Mr. Jain, please present.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, good evening, council. I'm quite pleased today to present the 2023 draft taxation and water and wastewater budgets. First and foremost, I'd like to extend a sincere thanks to all the administrative staff for all their continued efforts throughout budget preparation. And this budget in 2023 represents administration's best efforts to keep the tax rate and the levy requirement as low as possible while still being able to respond to the various market factors that were prevalent in 2022. So beginning off, the 2023 draft budget has an overall levy requirement of $10,335,509. This represents an approximately 7.95% increase from the 2022 levy requirement of $9,574,193. The chart below, you can see what the levy requirements were over the last 4 budget cycles. One thing to note is, of course, as council knows, a levy decrease was approved in 2021 to be able to provide our residents with a little bit of easement through COVID. But as such, our levy requirement from 2020 to 2022 did decrease by about a net of $10,000. So the 2023 levy requirement is a 7.82% increase from the levy requirement in 2020, and that represents an average annualized increase of 2.86% since 2020. The next slide here presents the residential tax rate increase. So as you can see there, my apologies. The next slide is the percentage change on the levy requirement. So as you can see there, we did a comparator of SCG municipalities that includes the city of Cornwall. So from 2019 to 2022, as you can see there, the Township of South Glengarry's average annual change percentage of the levy requirement was actually the lowest in all of SDG, including the city of Cornwall, at 2.14%. And the top 3 there, South Stormont, North Stormont, and North Dundas, actually had an average annual change percentage of about 4.1% if you average those out. The average change in the levy requirement from 2019 to 2023, so that includes the 7.95%, is projected to be 3.3%, which is the lowest of SDG municipalities for whom data is currently available. South Glengarry's levy increase in 2020 was the 3rd lowest amongst SDG municipalities at 3.54%. South Glengarry's levy increase in 2021 was the lowest amongst SDG municipalities at -3.03%. And South Glengarry's levy increase in 2022 was the 2nd lowest amongst SDG municipalities at 3.0%. And again, like I mentioned, from 2019 to 2022, the average change is the lowest in SDG, and is projected to, when you include 2023, is also projected to be the lowest in SDG. Moving on to the tax rate increase. So the tax rate increase, the residential tax rate rather, is projected to be 6.96% or $72.49 on the median residential assessment of $214,000. There's a little bit of a comparator chart again. So as you can see there, of the 6 townships and the city of Cornwall, the average change percentage from 2019 to 2022 was the 2nd lowest amongst SDG municipalities at a -0.77%. When averaged over the last 4 budget cycles, so that includes the 6.96 in 2023, the average annual residential tax rate increase is projected to be 0.99% or a total of $54.44. This represents an average annual increase of $13.61. Of the SDG municipalities for whom data is currently available, South Glengarry is projected to have the lowest average annual residential tax rate increase over the period of 2019 to 2023. So that includes, again, the 6.96% in 2023 at 0.78%, or a total of $39.90. This represents an average annual increase of $7.98. South Glengarry's residential tax rate increase was the second lowest amongst SDG municipalities in 2020 at negative 1.35%. South Glengarry's residential tax rate increase was the lowest amongst SDG municipalities in 2021 at negative 3.24%, and again was the lowest amongst SDG municipalities in 2022 at 1.59%. The next slide here shows the mill rate. And as you can see there, the mill rate follows the same logic as the residential tax rate, and the mill rate is coming in at $520.53 for SDG, for South Glengarry in 2023. Of the SDG municipalities for whom 2023 data is available, South Glengarry is projected to have the lowest mill rate increase over the period of 2019 to 2023 at 0.78%. And the chart there again shows it follows the same logic as the residential tax rate, that the township of South Glengarry had the second lowest mill rate average annual change percentage from 2019 to 2022 at negative 0.77%. And the mill rate, just for a bit of background, the way that we define it is a tax dollars per $100,000 of assessment. That's coming in at $520.53. I'd like to now go over the 2022 year-end estimates. So in 2022, salaries and benefits were over budgeted amounts by about $160,000. Purchase of services and equipment actually came in under budget by about $341,000. Contracts, fuel, and utilities came in under budget at $106,000. However, the one thing to point out here is our capital expenditures. So our capital expenditures and maintenance of capital assets was budgeted at $4.1 million and came in just shy of $8 million, representing a variance of $3.8 million. I'd also like to point out the transfer to the roads offset reserve. So the roads offset reserve, about $1.2 million, was set aside to assist in roads capital projects in 2022 and beyond. However, the one-time budgeted transfer to the roads offset reserve was not made in 2022, and in fact, that budgeted amount is being used to offset cost overages of 2022 roads capital projects. As far as revenues for 2022, our non-taxation revenues, so that includes government funding, transfers from reserves, fees and user charges, etc., were budgeted at approximately $9.8 million in 2022 and came in at approximately $10.1 million, representing a positive variance of $300,000. Our taxation, so that's the tax levy, was budgeted at $9,574,193, and because of some increased supplemental taxation, we came in about $80,000 higher on our taxation revenues. So as you can see there, we're projecting a deficit in 2022 of about $1.95 million based on budgeted amounts, largely due to the increased capital expenditures in 2022. And that deficit will have to get funded from the township's reserves. I'd like to quickly talk about a few market factors, starting off with inflation. So over the last 5 quarters, so September 2021 to December 2022, the consumer price index for Canada has increased by 7.14%. And in 2022, so January 2022 to December 2022, increased by 6.83%. So as the mayor mentioned, we're in a 40-year high inflation period. And that's not something that the common resident is immune to. And likewise, that's not something that the municipality is immune to either. The building construction price index for non-residential buildings has increased by 20.2% since Q1 of 2021. So it started at about 110 and has risen to 133.3. And it's even higher for residential buildings. So the BCPI for residential buildings increased from 123 to 163 since 2021, and that's a 32.6% increase. I'd like to talk a little bit about some above inflation pressures that are presented through 2022 and are represented in the 2023 budget. So fuel was budgeted in 2022 as at $151,000 approximately, and our actuals came in at approximately $345,000 for fuel. And as such, you know, we were about $200,000 overspent on fuel, or 129%. Similarly, hydro and heating costs exceeded budgeted amounts by 17%. So we were budgeted at about $225,000, and we came in at about $260,000. So the next market factor that I'd like to talk about is interest rates. So we recently had a conversation with Infrastructure Ontario, and so the rates that you see there have been updated as of February 8th, 2023. So you can see that a 15-year amortizing loan through Infrastructure Ontario is coming in at about 4.28%. The 2023 taxation budget includes borrowing $450,000 for the Second Line Road project, with projected debt servicing costs of $45,000. This represents 50% of the estimated cost of the project. The second half will be borrowed as part of the 2024 taxation budget. So now I'd like to present you with the 2023 draft taxation budget. So as you can see there, our overall expenditures are coming in at approximately $18.5 million, which represents a net reduction of $830,000. Salaries and benefits have increased by approximately $567,000, and that is due to the fact that we were overspent on salaries in 2022 by $160,000, and so we have to correct for that. We also have to account for the contractual wage increases to union staff, and the general wage increases to non-union staff rather. We also now have to account for the increased OMERS expense that is now given to part-time employees and other employees who may choose to opt in. And the number there also represents a reworking of our current staffing model. Purchases of services and equipment has we've been able to find some efficiencies there, and it's coming in approximately $550,000 under budget. Contracts, fuel, and utilities. So as I mentioned, fuel and utilities present above inflation pressures on the budget. Unfortunately, that's coming in over 2022 budgeted amounts by about $800,000. Capital expenditures are relatively stable from 2022, so a net increase of about $30,000. And we have some dollars spent for capital maintenance costs. And then, of course, we have some debt repayment charges there as well for the Second Line Road project. So we're coming in with total expenditures of about $18.5 million. As far as revenues are concerned, non-taxation revenue, so again, that includes government funding, transfers from reserves, and fees and user charges, et cetera, is coming in at $8.2 million, and that it represents an about $1.6 million decrease from 2022 budgeted amounts, largely due to the fact that in 2022 we were expecting, we had budgeted for about $1.4 million for the ARENA project from Infrastructure Canada, Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, or the ISIP program. So that, of course, it will not be received in 2023. So overall, that presents a net taxation requirement of $10,335,509. Next is the draft water and wastewater budget. So really the only large change there would be the capital expenditures. So the capital expenditures are coming in at about $1.355 million. And that is for the Glen Walter Water Tower project, as well as some costs allocated to the water and wastewater budgets for the purchase of a Valve trailer. As far as revenues, we have an increase in the government grants that are due to be received. The Glen Walter Water Tower project is funded through ISIP, and we will have to incur in some borrowing of long-term debt to be able to fund the projected costs for the projects in 2023. So you will see a long-term debt issuance there of about $147,000. So talking about debt a little bit, so the province under OREG 403/02 mandates that municipalities must maintain debt servicing charges at or below 25% of the municipality's previous year's own source revenues. The Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing has set the annual repayment limit for the township at $3,311,309. If estimated at a 5% interest rate and a 15-year term, the township can undertake long-term borrowing of approximately $13.4 million. Currently, the township has no debt. Further, this chart is actually provided by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and it shows a little bit of a sensitivity analysis on different interest rates and different terms. So the interest rates, the debt servicing costs rather that are in the 2023 budget are projected at an interest rate of 5% and a term of 15 years. So as I mentioned, the 2023 budget includes borrowing approximately $800,000 for the Second Line Road project and the Glen Walter water replacement, water tower and water main replacement project. This will result in debt servicing charges of approximately $80,000 in 2023. An additional $450,000 will be borrowed as part of the 2024 budget to fund the Second Line Road project to completion. And then lastly, I'd like to touch on reserves as well. So as you can see there, in 2022, we were budgeted to take out about $1.5 million, put into reserves about $1.5 million and take out from reserves about $3.1 million, so a net negative reserve transfer of $1.6 million. We came in well above that because we had to push, or council chose to push forward some purchases for the fire department that were planned for 2023 and beyond to 2022. In 2023, we are transferring approximately $1.2 million into reserves and taking out approximately $1.8 million, and that is a net reserve transfer of a negative $600,000. So the township is projected to end 2022 with a total reserve balance of approximately $9.1 million after funding the deficit, and projected to end 2023 with a total reserve balance of approximately $8.5 million. And at this time, I'd like to invite GM of Corporate Services and our clerk, Ms. Campo, to present the general government budget.
Were there any questions just off the top through council, just going through those slides to Mr. Jane? May I just ask a few for clarification, just to make sure? Whenever you mentioned fuel, does it include the plus or minus the contractors, like the fuel overage? That was just our fleet.
Correct.
Great. Borrowing the second half, so we'd borrow 450 or 400 and some thousand this year, 400 and some thousand next year.
Correct.
So we're doing the road half and half. And water debt is included in the entire debt thing, so at 30,000 or 30 million, or 30 some million?
Correct.
Okay, just to be clear. Thank you very much. Ms. Campo, or Mrs. Campo, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. So I'll be reviewing the general government budget. Mr. Jane will be finishing it because our general government budget consists of various departments within the municipality. So Within general government, we oversee the budgets that, for expenses that are related to council. We also oversee the general government administrative budget. So those are expenses that are related to corporate services, so that being the office of the CAO, the clerk's office, general communications, human resources, general administration, as well as financial services. So just to highlight a few accomplishments in 2022. So we're coming off of a very eventful and busy year in 2022 with corporate services. As you all know, we had our 2022 municipal election, which overall we deemed to be quite a success. We relocated to our new council chambers here at Tartan Hall, which involved a lot of planning, some introduction of some technology so that we can stream our meetings. And I think we're quite satisfied with the quality of the live stream we're able to provide for the community. We completed our service delivery review, which council received a couple meetings ago. We negotiated a new collective agreement, and we also finalized the tri-party agreement related to Cairn Island, and that was between the Township of South Glengarry, Parks Canada, as well as the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne. So we had a busy year in corporate services, and that doesn't even touch on some of the projects in the finance department. So going into 2023, our budget is generally status quo. So we're not really adding to the budget, keeping in mind and being cognizant of wanting to keep expenses as low as we can. So on the legislative side, some of the highlights or things that we wanted to bring to council's attention. So you'll note that we've budgeted a little bit more related to conferences. And the reason for that being, as we're coming out on the other side of COVID, these conferences that have historically been attended are starting to come back. There are conferences that at one time were combined that have now been separated. And administratively, we feel there's great value to council attending these conferences. This is where you have your delegations with provincial ministers, you network with other municipalities, and you hear about some of the great things happening through the province that we're able to bring back to South Glengarry. So we've accounted for that in the budget this year. Another anomaly this year, something that we don't do every year, is strategic planning. So typically in the first year following a municipal election, we will have a strategic planning sessions. And that's really an opportunity for council to sit down, brainstorm, and really set your goals for this term of council. So it's been about 8 years since we've done a true strategic planning process. So in 2014, we developed a strategic plan. In 2018, we really just reviewed our present plan and made some modifications. So given it's been 8 years, we've budgeted a little bit more this time around to bring a consultant in and really help guide us through that process to set council's goals for this coming term. On the administrative side of things, our biggest project going into 2023 is going to be the implementation of an electronic data retention management system. And essentially that is an electronic filing and archiving system. This project is being fully funded through COVID funding reserves. The nice thing with this project going forward is that there is not going to be an added cost year to year. Because this program is built into Microsoft SharePoint, and we already subscribe to the Microsoft suite of products, it is not an added annual cost for us to use this system. So The initial implementation is we've funded through COVID funding, and going forward, the cost is already budgeted for year to year. And I will turn it over to Mr. Jain to speak to financial services.
So as council is aware, in 2023, financial services is going to be responsible for bringing in about $18.5 million, if this budget is approved, of monies to the township, and will be responsible for an equal amount of money leaving the township. So there's one project that financial services will undertake in 2023, which is the long-term financial plan. So the long-term financial plan is an important tool that will allow the township to apply a disciplined and integrated approach to financial planning that identifies and manages risks to the township's long-term financial sustainability. And it's going to address a few key things, namely the effectiveness and efficiency of the township's financial policies and procedures, the predictability and sustainability of the township's revenues, the township's ability to respond to financial challenges such as the COVID pandemic and address uncertainty over the short, medium, and long term, assess the condition and replacement cycles of the township's infrastructure and other assets, and ensure that funding gaps identified by the asset management plan are minimized. It will also help determine the appropriate level of reserves by setting target reserve balances that align with the township's planned future obligations. It will determine the effectiveness and efficiency of the township's reserves and reserve fund policies, and will determine effective liability management strategies that are sustainable and are able to promote growth. So overall, as you can see there, the general government budget is projected to increase by approximately $430,000. We are projecting a $222,000 increase to salaries and benefits. And there's two factors driving that increase. Number one is we were well over budget on salaries and benefits in general government in 2022. And so we have to respond to that overage. And then number two is we are going to be adding, or the 2023 budget includes the addition of one full-time financial analyst to assist with the heavy workload that is projected in financial services in 2023. Our consulting materials and equipment budget is going up by $111,000, and that is largely due to the two projects, the long-term financial plan and the electronic data records management system plans. As far as the other expenditures, they are largely status quo. We are expecting about $330,000 from the sale of land. And overall, we are projecting a revenue decrease in general government of about $86,000. So at this time, Ms. Compo and I can take any questions.
Do I see any questions from around this table? Can I ask? Oh, yes, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. And thank you, Mr. Jans and Ms. Compo for the presentation. And I'm going to, without trying to make a statement, I'm going to ask a little bit about the additional person. And mainly, I think after intensive discussions with yourself, that I'm quite aware of what the person is going to be doing. But just for the public to know and to understand the extra things that are coming down from the province as far as our asset management plan and so forth, and some things that we would really like to get a handle on, you know, including our dumps, what the closure costs are going to be, because there's only a few years left in some of them, and this sort of thing. If you could just elaborate a little bit on that, just so that we're all on the same page. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So you hit a bunch of them right off the bat there, Deputy Mayor Lang. So yes, in 2023, financial services is projected to have a very heavy workload. The PS 3280 regulations for asset retirement obligations have to be completed in 2023, and that is a provincial regulation. And of course will require an extended amount of staff time to be able to complete. The asset management planning update also has to be completed in 2023, and we have to formulate a financing strategy for all of township assets. The long-term financial plan, as I mentioned, will require an extended amount of staff hours to be completed. For myself, it's a top priority as it will set target reserve balances. We do also have to undergo a update of our landfill liability, and that will require some additional hours. Additional staffing will also be needed for the management of a formal investment strategy as that council would like to implement, and to manage the debt register now that we are issuing more debt for the first time. Quarterly financial reporting to council is something that I'd like to tackle in 2023. So that would include operating variance reports with commentary from general managers, capital reports, and timely reserve reports. We also have a comprehensive fees bylaw that will require analysis from finance, and unfortunately, in the 2023 budget, we had to leave some dollars out because a comprehensive fees bylaw was not able to be completed. There is some catch-up work from 2022 that needs to be completed, and additionally, one of my long-term goals would be to initiate multi-year budgeting that allows council to decide on a 3-year budget cycle rather than simply planning on a 1-year cycle. So it is going to be a heavy workload for the finance department, and hence the need for a financial analyst.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, just a quick follow-up, and all very valid points. Something of particular interest to me was the quarterly budgeting. I think council sometimes it kind of feels like, you know, we're going through the year and we're not aware of exactly where we are. We know where we intend to get to at the end of the year. We know what budget was, and we'd like to kind of see that progress a little more often as we're going through the year. So I'm really looking forward to that one. And I think the multi-year budgeting would be a great thing. I mean, it's obviously, you know, the further out you go, the more that it's a guideline, but those things are good to kind of keep us up on where we're headed, and so I think that along with asset management is going to go a long way towards us being able to get through the next few years with our costs so high, and we're trying to keep taxation down. So thank you.
Councillor Bougie, then we'll go to Councillor Jaworski.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Mr. Jane, for the presentation and all the hard work you put into this budget. I'm sure it was many hours, and well, I know it was many hours, and we appreciate it. A couple of questions. One is in regard to debt. So if I'm right in saying this, so for 2023, if I'm just going to be specific, for Second Line Road, we'd be borrowing, and then 2024, we would finish the remaining part of the road. Am I correct in saying that?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, as far as the borrowing of the debt is concerned, we will borrow the first half in 2023 and the second half in 2024, just to ease the burden on taxation. That being said, we aren't projecting any cash flow concerns, and if through Ms. Gia McDonald's department, if the entire road is able to be completed in 2023, that it will be completed in 2023. However, of course, we have to set up receivables for the incoming issuance of debt in 2024 if council approves the project.
Okay, can I have a follow-up? So, I mean, we have a very healthy reserve at the moment. Is there a way that we can borrow some of the money from the reserves to get the project done and then pay ourselves back instead of paying interest to the bank? Is that possible?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I have the reserve report in front of me here. So the Roads, Bridges, and Structures Reserve is projected to be approximately $500,000 at the end of 2023. The Roads Equipment Reserve is projected to be approximately $800,000 at the end of 2023. So the Roads Equipment Reserve is used for the renewal of equipment assets and fleet, so fleet renewal and growth rather. And unfortunately, at this stage, the Roads, Bridges, and Structures Reserve, we are not projecting enough dollars to be able to fund the $450,000 and then also fund the upcoming 10-year capital roads plan.
Thank you for that. Just, I guess, one more question in regards to tax arrears. I don't know if that's a line item, or can you maybe just give us an update on, on that situation as well? I don't know if you have it in front of you, or?
So as far as tax arrears are concerned, we are continuing on the process of formalizing a tax arrears policy and going down that path. We are projected in 2022 to end the year with tax arrears of about 30 to 35%. We have gotten indication from auditors that our tax arrears, a normal level for a municipality of our size, would be about 15%. So it would be a top priority in 2023 to address the tax arrears.
Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McDonald. Thank you, Mr. Jane. So with respect to the additional staff person, as you have experienced, my natural inclination to that suggestion was to push back fairly hard. And so, being transparent with that, I wanted to build a bit on what Deputy Mayor Lang had said, because certainly that has been there's a few things that you touched on that the financial analyst could do that have been things that were things that I had wanted to do in the past, but, we realized that we just didn't have, enough folks to do those things. And so definitely that quarterly financial reporting, I think, is something that is of huge value. And I think it makes sense to invest in getting, having someone who's able to produce that or assist in producing that. The other issues, our landfill liability, that the number that we have in terms of that liability, we know is out of date, we know it's incorrect, and we know from seeing townships around us that it can have it can be very high. And so I think it's really important that we get that up to date as soon as possible. And I know it's not a straightforward exercise. So again, that's something that is important to me. Also watching, some of our neighboring municipalities that have the multi-year budgeting and the long-term financial planning, seeing the level of, one thing, like if you look over the history of what we've done here in South Glengarry, there has been a lot of up and down in terms of our levy, a lot of up and down in terms of our tax rate. And, I think it is better for the residents, it's better for our operation to try to be as consistent and have a long-term view so that those ups and downs are minimized. And so again, I see there's a lot of benefit in putting together a long-term, financial plan. So there's a lot of things that I want, and I recognize that if to do those things, that it does require, some assistance there. And certainly, the issue of tax arrears, that's not new. That's always been sort of a monkey on our back here in South Glengarry, that, again, it takes an immense amount of focus to bring down the tax arrears. It takes, a lot of time. And again, if we want to bring that down from where we are to what's, a recommended level, and I think it's only fair to all the residents that we do ensure that everyone is paying their taxes. Again, I think we need to, it seems clear. This has been an issue over many years. It seems clear that we do need to invest in more people to be able to tackle that. So those are the items that I do like to hear about the financial, that, is a possibility in this budget for the future. But still, I do have that natural inclination to want to push back. But thank you.
Councillor McDonnell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I have a question. I had a question along the same lines as Councillor Bogie, just in regards to utilizing our reserves. I know we've gone over this before in regards to our reserves, and they are for the most part, are all budgeted for or are to be used in the subsequent years. I do wish we could find a spot in there that would allow us to use some of those dollars, and maybe that's just out of the cards right now, but I look at, we're projecting to end at about 8.5 million at the end of 2023 at our reserve levels. If there was a way to use this, we're talking second line roads, $1 million project roughly. it would be nice to see us to be able to use those dollars, because often we are criticized when we go out in the public and we're proposing a budget increase or a levy increase and subsequent tax rate increase. And people are often kind to remind us that there's enough in reserves to run the township for a year without taxation. So it's just, this is something I'd like to investigate more, because as much as I'm not afraid of debt, in the sense that I think it's a natural part of business and operating a business, and not to say that the municipality is a business, but to spread over some of our costs over the years. But that convenience comes at a cost in terms of interest. So if there is, I don't know if there is a set of those reserves that we do see, 6 years before we're going to be using those dollars. I think we've had this conversation around the debt as well. We're budgeting 45,000 roughly, but I think we're all on board that if we are going to be taking on debt, it's going to be not the term of that loan. It'll be quick repayment and committed to getting that down, hopefully in as short a many years as possible. So I don't know if it for me, it's a serious investigation that we're not borrowing the money today. We're committing to the roads project, I think, in the levy, but if there's a way to avoid that borrowing, I would be very happy with that.
And if I may, for Mr. Jane, I don't know if that's the specific nature of that question might have to come back. I don't want to put you on the spot,
Yes.
because numbers and reserves requires more than just a first blush. You'd want to check that. But if you feel confident, you can answer the question now.
Yeah, I just want to briefly sort of clarify the $8.5 million number, right? So that $8.5 million number might be a little bit facetious, for lack of a better word. About 2.2 of that is water and wastewater. Additionally, approximately 500,000 of that is restricted reserves that cannot be used. About $1.1 million of that is the landfill reserve, that monies that we're keeping aside for landfill closure and post-closure costs, and for additional capital projects that need to be done at the landfill site. And about $2.5 million of that is the general reserve that really is used to fund any deficits that we may run at year end and house any surpluses that we may have at year end. So really the specific reserves that can fund roads-related capital is really the Roads, Bridges, and Structures Reserve, or if council chooses, the roads equipment reserve. So.
No, thank you for that. Like I say, it's something that often comes up, and I know the deputy mayor has brought it up as well. We often get criticized as, maybe being like squirrels, but not to be seen as we're not wasting the time going and looking at borrowing, especially in this case. I did want to just comment as well on the additional staff member, and this will be the first conversation we really have around this position in open council in front of the public, and as we, at least in our past term, the 3 members around this table have had. Anytime we've done a restructuring, anytime we look at these things, we start these conversations in a legal closed session. And we talk about them, and I think we get often pretty heated, and we don't take this lightly, especially when we are looking at adding another salary or position in general. It's the same as if we were looking at doing removing staff from the municipality. It's never taken lightly. So I think that just needs to be highlighted, that this is not the first we're talking about this, and we're all letting this graze pass. I personally, and I know everybody else around this table, takes it extremely serious and is always very skeptical and put back when there's an ask for a new staff member. But when we have the opportunity to sit down and see the justification, especially from yourself, in this case, it's something that I think we can justify as we move forward with that position, and the good that's going to come out of it, especially as was highlighted in the other programs. I don't have to go back through the landfill and the long-term planning, et cetera, but I think your department needs to be maybe strengthened a bit more, and we have some underlying issues all over the township, and cleaning some of those up as well while we're at it. But for sure, I think there's a justifiable need for this position at this point in time, the way this municipality is structured.
All right, I had some things too, and like I understand that as a group, sometimes we have individual targets that won't be met on the benefit of the group, and I think in front of you, you have council recognizing that the requests in front of you are greater than your current requirements. I do say my small government, and I probably lost sleep last night thinking about this, trying to think, like, what's good for staff, what's good for council relationships, what's good for the community, like, what do I represent? So this might be one of the targets that my core nature, much like everybody else, kind of it backs away from, but the request of council as a whole is heavy, and I think everybody's being quite nice too. With the HST ITC thing mentioned, there is a possibility that there will be monies coming in that kind of offset it over the few years, as much as that I would say my core beliefs may not align. I see the need from council, so good on that one. I do have two questions of the clerk, if I may. With council, I know typically the deputy mayor and mayor would go to 4 events, and council would go to 2. I think in the first year of council, typically there's more requirement because it's nice for new councilors to go. And then I guess looking around the table, it might be something for 2024 to discuss, not this year, because this is our first year where we're together. But like that is a way to pare back a little bit. I'm not trying to say it just because I'm in this seat if I'd say it the same. So that might be something for another meeting. And then specifically, sorry, EDRMS. So we're doing this. Do you anticipate an administrative burden to do it, or do you think it'd be absorbed within the current staffing complement?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to comment first on the on your question regarding the conferences. So historically, you're correct. Members of council typically attended 2 conferences. However, that was at a time when Roma and Good Roads were one conference, and then council typically attended AMO later in the year. However, several years ago, there was a decision made to separate the Roma and Good Roads conferences at the conference level, essentially creating a situation where there were now 3 conferences that council wished to attend. Of course, then COVID hit. There were a number of years where there were no conferences or just virtual conferences. So going forward, presently we, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Jane, but I don't believe we have a policy that specifically states the number of conferences that council members may attend. It's just, it's been one of those things where there were 2 conferences and those were the ones that were attended. So going forward, if it's the will of council for us to develop a policy to establish the levels or number of conferences attended by a member, we can certainly do that. But that is the reasoning in terms of the increase in the number of conferences attended. To touch on your second question, no, I don't anticipate a large increase to administrative burden with the EDRMS system. In the first year, yes, and that'll the corporate services department will bear the brunt of that, which we've planned accordingly. But I don't anticipate that it's something that, and I mean, going back to when we first implemented the TOMRMS filing system, I think at the onset there's some work involved in implementing it, but once it's running and we've grown accustomed to it, I don't anticipate there would be a large administrative burden to that.
Okay, thank you. Sometimes there's indirect things. I just want to make sure we're not burning people out. So then it looks like Fire Chief Robertson, sorry. And Mr. Jane?
There we go. Thank you, Council, and through Mr. Mayor. So I'm pleased to review our 2022 accomplishments and speak to some of our 2023 goals. So, with fleet, in 2022, we added 4 vehicles to our fleet. 3 of those were replacing units that were taken out of service. Those were a tanker in the Williamstown station, a new pumper in the Martintown station, and a new pumper in the Williamstown station, including the replacement of a pickup truck, which is the chief's vehicle, command vehicle. So of those, 3 of those larger vehicles that were brought in, they were actually, they were set over 3 budget years. So we just advanced the 2023 vehicle into the 2022 year due to advantageous pricing. So facilities, I'm proud to say that we're virtually complete of the Williamstown station, the renovation of that former roads garage. That'll happen over the next couple of weeks, and we'll be able to move into that location. I know staff is quite keen, and it'll be an excellent improvement of our services to the community. So, incident review in 2022, total calls for service were 254. That's a 61% increase over 2021. The years during the pandemic, our call volumes were considerably lower for numerous reasons. But even when we compare to pre-pandemic 2019, we're still higher. Colleagues in the fire service across Ontario were all seeing the same increase in calls. There's a lot more structure fires in the last year or two, a lot more highway incidents. People just seem to be keen to be back out on the road, and also seem to be doing a lot of things on their own properties too. So someday the actual causes for this I'm sure will come out, but we're just surmising at this point. So we did have 15 significant structure fires, which was high for our annual sort of average. We had a number of agricultural losses this year, and a number of residential losses also. So the 22, some highlights for the 2022 budget to bring up. Fuel costs, once again, we spoke to the the multi-department, but higher costs, but fire also was significantly higher this past year due to price at the pump and increased call volume. So our overall firefighter payroll, so this would be for non-full-time staff, non-career staff. This is for our paid-on-call or volunteer staffing. It was very close to being on budget, despite the increased call volume. So next slide, please. So just to quickly touch base on firefighter certification, as council is well aware, by 2026, all of our fire staff need to be fully certified to NFPA standards. The numbers presented here show that we are, in essence, 50% of the way there. We're very happy with our progress. Courses are being done in-house by our training officer, and we're seeing significant cost savings compared to some other municipalities who have to send all their staff out. So that's a benefit of our current staffing model. So one other quick highlight is we've brought 11 new fire staff on this evening. They're actually just on the fire floor right now with their first training session. 11 new members, and they're all keen to get started, so we're happy about that. 2023 budget notes. We're seeing because of the significantly higher 401 responses, we're seeing increased MTO revenue. So these would be revenues for our responses to 400 series highways. Much like we've spoken about with our other departments so far this evening, and we'll continue on, I'm sure, our supplies, our protective equipment, all of the items that we use as expenses, we're seeing significantly inflated or higher costs. Those increased costs, we still need to supply our staff with the tools to do the role and to meet the calls for assistance from the community. So we're being as cost effective as we can be. We're sharing equipment amongst all our stations, and we're making sure that the services provided from each location reflect the call volume for those stations. So, but they are significantly higher. So, and this year we're going to take we're proposing to take a different route with our legislative requirements for fire inspections, fire investigation, public education. We're working through a draft agreement that I'll be able to bring to council hopefully in the very near future on a shared service platform for fire prevention officer position. This is something that we are, like mentioned, legislated to do. We see areas that we can actually, you know, I've talked about higher structure fires. I've talked about some of the issues that we've been dealing with in the last year and years prior. The fire service would like to put ourselves out of business by preventing the issues that we deal with, the emergencies. That can only be done with public education and inspection and enforcement. And if we do a better job of that, we are going to save money and, you know, directly save lives and property in our community if we can deal with those issues prior. So this, we're looking to we've budgeted $17,500 for a shared service fire prevention officer. This would be a 1 day per week role where this person will deal with some of these issues that we are required to do, but we just don't have the ability at this point to do in the means that it needs to be done correctly. So, and finally, transfer to fire reserves of $450,000. This is a slight increase over 2022, but it meets the very similar path to what we've been on to meet our asset plan requirements for the fire service. So, capital projects, as mentioned at our previous capital session, just a quick recap. The Williamstown Fire Station, the roof replacement. As mentioned, this item has come up sooner than we had hoped, but it needs to be carried forward into the 2023 capital budget, and that's for $250,000. Currently, we are working with the engineering company to evaluate the building to see what options that we can bring forward to council for basically options for roof replacement. So next, and the last item will be for the water storage system. This was an item that was pulled out of the current capital project building the station due to, as mentioned in the past, a possible partnership with Parks Canada and the Sir John Johnson building. In brief, they are requiring a system similar to what is described here for a water storage system. So if we can have combined financial benefits to working together, we're proposing that. If that wasn't to happen, this, as noted, is the requirement for the fire service specifically. Quick update on that file. We've been working with Parks Canada to really evaluate what their needs are, and I've actually just said this afternoon been invited to a meeting tomorrow, an update meeting. So hopefully we'll have some firm information for council in the very, very near future. So. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Jain for a review of the actual figures.
So thank you, Fire Chief Robertson. So starting off with salaries and benefits, you can see that there is a minor increase to salaries and benefits, largely due to the contractual-based increases to non-union staff, the general wage increases. Purchase of services and equipment has increased slightly by $63,000 to about $300,000 due to just the increased costs of equipment. Contracts has increased, again, very slightly by $30,000, and that is largely due to the shared services fire prevention officer contract. Capital expenditures have drastically reduced due to just less spending on the two capital projects that we have for fire services in 2023. And then the transfer to reserve has been up by $30,000 to be able to fund 2023 capital costs, and then also to be able to appropriately life cycle cost future all the fire assets. As far as revenues are concerned, there is a minor increase to non-taxation revenues for MTO fire calls for $40,000, and then again a significant reduction to transfer from reserves due to just the reduced capital expenditures in fire.
If I may, okay, we'll go to Councillor Jaworski first. I'll go afterwards, yeah.
Thank you very much, through you, Mayor. Thank you, Fire Chief, for your review. I have a comment and a question. My comment, just on the roof replacement, I guess I just want to make a plug for, obviously we are in the financial times we're in are a bit less certain than what they've been in the past. But I do want to emphasize that, South Glengarry is, certainly relatively speaking, compared to our neighbors, we're on very solid financial footing. And I want to just always encourage that when we do projects like this, that we really look at that total asset life cycle cost. And so, what is most a priority to me is a roof that will last a very long time, and hopefully something that, has the potential for bringing down the energy costs for this building as low as possible. Again, over like the long term, which is, how we keep our buildings for a very, very long time. So I just want to make sure we keep that lens always, that we're not trying to save small amounts today that end up costing us money in the future, which flat roofs are I'm not a big fan of those ones for that fact. But my question to you is on the MTO revenue. I know there's been a lot of comments about, 401 claims and perhaps the reimbursement that is perhaps should be lower than it should be. I'm just wondering if you could comment on that, and that, you're mentioning we have higher response claims, but is that just linearly, relative to how many calls we're reporting to, or is the situation improved in terms of MTO reimbursing us? Thanks.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. The 401 revenues, to start with, as mentioned, our calls to the 401 are up, so there's more occurrences. Working with the province for proper reimbursement of our services. The province does not pay municipal tax, and that's the reason why we're compensated for our responses to provincial properties. We are only allowed, and this is through legislation, we are only allowed to claim for services rendered. So if we respond to the 401, be it a significant incident where there's long labor times, we use a lot of supplies, we can claim all those back. The issue that the fire service in Ontario has is ghost calls. Someone thinks they see something happen on the 401, someone pulls off on the side and someone perceives it to be an emergency. That person, the perceived emergency then drives away, and all emergency services are running the 401 trying to find this significant emergency. We are not able to claim for those incidents. So we're working with the province. Hopefully that can be changed at some point. But as far as being able to claim for the services that we do, that system is, we are getting much better service from the province, we think, than we were in the past. So, yeah. Thank you.
Councillor McNadel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Robertson, thanks for the presentation. Just a question along that same vein. I think at one point, maybe at the start of this term of council, or the past term of council, we were, we had done a delegation up in Toronto. I'm trying to remember if it was on, I know you say services rendered. At one point, were we not paid for traffic control? Like at one point, were we doing traffic control or asked to do traffic control, or some of the services we provide that we are paid for now or maybe weren't paid at one point?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. In Ontario, as per the Highway Traffic Act, the only people who can close a road or conduct traffic control would be the OPP, police services, or roads departments in certain situations. That being said, for health and safety reasons, we can make changes on the 401 or in any situation if we need to protect our employees. That would be the only time that we set into sort of traffic control or road closures, very short term. The province now, if it's justified in the overall emergency, it's accepted. So, thank you.
And just to follow up, I guess, at one point, we were also talking our vehicles being used or more or less commandeered by the OPP when they're on the highway, and maybe not getting that fireman's time back. Are we still experiencing that now, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, we are being compensated for all the time that we're on the highway. Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Bougie?
Through Mr. Mayor, my question was along the same lines with the MTO, because I know in the past it was a problem for reimbursement, and I mean, it's good to see that improvement has been made, but at the same time, I feel like it's unacceptable if we're called for service, whether there's a severe incident or not, we should be reimbursed. So I feel like this council maybe could put a motion forward or have a delegation in the future to try and solve that, because if, I mean, we are providing a service either way to the MTO there. My second comment was on the Shared Service Fire Prevention Officer. I think that's a great partnership there. What will come with some cost savings, and that's great to see. And with our roof replacement, I mean, after the roof is replaced, we probably have a pretty brand-new building right there, and I'm sure there was, well, I don't know how much it would have been to be new, but it pretty much is new, and we've had a lot of cost savings in that project, so it's great to see that it's going to be opening soon, so thank you for your work on that. And that's
Deputy Mayor Lang?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Thank you, Chief Robertson. And, I'm just going to highlight something that you already mentioned, and selfishly so, because I know some of us in the community have got a little bit of flack maybe over the last year or two. We added someone to the fire service as another full-time position as our training officer, deputy chief. But at the moment, are we at 60 or approaching 60% certification? It was somewhere in that vicinity, correct?
Correct.
And I can tell you as a station chief, when certification was announced by the province, it was like, how in the world will we ever get this done? And we're getting it done. And we would not have been able to do this without extreme cost, having to send everybody away for courses and stuff, and they're not right next door either. So I just pointing it out that there's something, that position is really, it's paying this township back, I believe. Thanks.
Just a quick comment to build on that. Thank you for your comment there. Other municipalities are struggling to achieve what we're achieving at this point. We are coming to a point in our municipality, like every municipality, with volunteers in all sectors. It's more and more difficult to run our organizations, our volunteer fire services, we need to do everything we can to keep our valued staff and to continue with the model that we have. The other models for fire services are significantly more expensive. The addition of a training officer, deputy chief position was a big ticket item, but it, in the long run, even the short term and the long run, it will save us significant money over some of the other options that we would have been pressed with because of the situation that we're facing, both from legislative requirements and the way our communities and society has changed over the years. So, thank you.
Yeah, my only comment was kind of piggybacking on Deputy Mayor Lang's is the municipality of South Dundas, I think, had to increase their salary line quite a bit more with only 3 stations because of the training. So that is something that you can see for comparable. So obviously, much as they're saying, it is ringing true from the financial lens as well. Seeing no more questions, shall we bring up Ms. Haley? Please proceed when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. So I have a few items that I would like to highlight in our meeting this evening. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm very thankful that the budget I have to prepare is quite easy in comparison to my colleagues. So I really feel for them when they're spending hours and hours and days on big capital budgets, and I kind of do feel for them because mine certainly is not like that. That being said, there's still a few things that I would like to bring to Council's attention. So on the land use planning side, we do have an increase in salary, and the reason for the increase in salary is because of a position that was approved in 2022, being the community planning position. So that's now reflected in our 2023 budget. We also are now budgeting the salary allocations more accurately. In reviewing the budget from 2022, we realized that one employee was allocated entirely to building, so that's been removed from building and being allocated to planning, and that would be our GIS and planning position. In terms of some projects that I'd like to talk about, we did discuss some of these in our previous capital budget meeting, but we have budgeted $50,000 for the industrial park. That is a carryover of $25,000 from 2022, and these dollars are coming from our planning reserves. And so the project will only proceed if we receive a positive environmental impact study. I would like to let Council know that I am very disappointed that I still don't have a result of that study. I've been in communication with the consultant on a regular basis, reminding them that I'd like to see the results. If we would have had the results, I would have been able to speak more confidently with Council or even be more accurate in my projections. But until that study is received, I can't tell you exactly what the expenditures will be. However, as soon as I have it, I will be bringing a report to Council letting you know where we're at and what the next steps will be for 2023, but it will remain within the 2023 budget. We did have money allocated in the budget for the completion of a new zoning bylaw. So our council has worked very hard along with the other councils in SDNG to receive an approved official plan. And when we have an approved official plan, we're then obligated to bring our zoning bylaw into compliance, which means every municipality will have a new zoning bylaw. To hire a consultant to complete a new zoning bylaw today is going to cost in the $100,000 and $150,000 range. It's quite an expensive project. We're very fortunate that the United Counties is using monies from their 2022 modernization fund, I believe, that they've retained a consultant to do a review of all the bylaws, make recommendations for consistencies between the municipalities, and that will result in a template that we can then complete this project in-house. So initially we had 20,000, we reduced that to 5,000, knowing between my skills and other staff we should be able to complete the project, and we're hoping that this project will be completed by the end of 2023. One item that is new to planning is moving forward using Cloud Permit. I believe Council's familiar with Cloud Permit as it was implemented in the building department last year. It's a program that's available to the public to be able to apply for different applications and processes. From the land use planning perspective, we're using it right now internally. Primarily, we're using it to comment on severance applications, and then that information is uploaded to the United Counties. But our goal is to branch out and use the software at its full extent. And that money's been included this year for $15,000. Planning is intending to complete a variety of projects internally. We're looking at completing our floodplain mapping implementation. In fact, we have an upcoming special meeting of council on March 20th for that. As I mentioned, we'll be doing the new zoning bylaw. We're hoping to commence a cultural heritage plan. That's something that we're behind in. Again, these are items that we're going to do in-house. And we're currently working on a demographics and employment study with the United Counties. I'm really hopeful that that's going to result in positive official plan amendments that will bring more of our properties along the 401 corridor into a designation that can serve the trucking industry, that will result in positive development. And of course, with our recent government changes, provincial government changes to the Planning Act, we are required to update a variety of bylaws and processes to implement those changes. So it will be a busy 2023, but hopefully we can achieve those tasks. So moving on to emergency planning, there's really not major changes in emergency planning. You'll see that we've allocated $5,000 in training and development. This money is going to be utilized for training and development of an alternate community emergency management coordinator. So that's an individual that assists during a state of emergency and also assists in preparing the annual emergency program. You'll see the $5,000 that is there will cover our staff training and exercise for the community emergency management group. It's possible that we may not utilize all those dollars. If we're fortunate that the province offers training at no cost, we'll certainly take advantage of that, and that does happen from time to time, as well as if we're able to do joint training and exercises with the United Counties, we'll certainly strive to do that. Moving on to our building department. This has been a difficult year to estimate what our revenues will be. We do expect maybe a decrease in residential starts with the increased interest rates. We're not 100% sure if this will actually happen or not, but in speaking with contractors and other people in the market, this is possible. However, we do expect an increase in the non-residential building permits, so perhaps it'll balance out, but we were very careful in how we budgeted that revenue. You'll see in this department we have a decrease in salaries because of a result of reallocating salaries properly. So I'm glad we're doing that because it's just more reflective of the department costs. And you'll also notice that we've decreased the consultant budget. So just a reminder of what the consultant budget is we have two individuals in our community that one is our retired building official and another one is a retired building official from North Glengarry that are qualified to assist if we need extra services in building inspections to meet the legislated timelines, as well as if employees are not available or if they happen to be away or if the workload is increased so much that we have to make sure we're doing our inspections within 48 hours and things like that. So we still have monies in the budget for that, but we've decreased it. In terms of our septic system employee, that process works very well. We get a lot of positive comments from the community on that, and that area has been increased to reflect the approved contract by council. And for the most part, the application fees cover these costs. In reviewing this budget with our chief building official, we are currently operating at approximately 75% cost recovery. So in 2022, council approved a new fee bylaw, and that new fee bylaw helps us operate at a 75% cost recovery. Of course, the goal is that our fees would cover all costs. That's the legislative goal, but in this case, we're at least achieving 75%. So moving on to economic development. Oops, I've got my slides in the wrong order, I apologize. Moving on to municipal law enforcement. Municipal law enforcement has also now moved to cloud permit for a software tracking complaint that was actually launched today. So if council has a chance to check out our website, we did a little trial run today using a property, and it seems to be quite easy with drop-down menus. So I'm sure there'll be a little bit of a learning curve for implementation. But with using consistent software, we're hoping we're going to see some efficiencies internally on how the software speaks to one another. You'll also may notice that our training costs have been reduced. And on a positive note, our manager of municipal law enforcement is now a fully certified municipal law enforcement officer. That certainly does take some time. It's taken a few years. Additional training costs are going to be budgeted for, and probably will always be budgeted for, as fully training is not completed for the property standards component, and that should be completed though within the next couple of years. So moving on to economic development, you'll see we have an increase in salary, and this is a result of allocating salaries properly, as well as last year we did not have a full-time economic development officer, where in 2023 we will. There's a couple of things that I do want to highlight to council. Tomorrow is the deadline for the RED grant. The RED grant is a rural economic development grant that's provided, or that's available from the province. And it offers a variety of different opportunities for economic development departments. And the goal of us applying for the RED grant is we've allocated $20,000 in the budget. If we're successful, the province will match it by 20 with a total of $40,000. And the goal of this grant is to implement many of the recommendations that were revealed in our business retention and expansion study. This study was completed and adopted by council in December of 2019. Unfortunately, we were not able to move forward with a great deal of implementation with COVID coming in the spring of 2020. It really did impact on how we did business, on how we interacted with our businesses, and how our businesses did their business. So now that we're coming out of COVID, hopefully, we're now feeling that we're in a much better position to be able to consider these recommendations very seriously, and hopefully it'll result in us having improved communication with our businesses, more available useful tools, connecting our different departments. The grant will also include website and graphic design work as well. The other projects within economic development that council's familiar with is our CIP, which we've budgeted $30,000 for in 2023, our awards gala, as well as our shop local programs. So moving on to my second last slide. So in 2021, I believe, yes, 2021, I took over the responsibility of looking after municipally owned land. And when looking after a land, there's been times where we've been looking at either selling land, donating land, improving the inventory of land, working with council and determining what we want to keep, what becomes surplus. For 2023, we've allocated $20,000 in the budget. This will cover any necessary surveys, studies that may arise throughout the year as council directs. So other years we may have spent more on that. We were being a little bit more careful this year. But if there's any lands that come up where we either want to declare surplus, we need survey work being done, whether it's to improve recreation decisions or help in making decisions for recreation, roads, things like that, keep in mind we have this money budgeted. The beginning of the meeting, you heard our treasurer introduce that we are hoping to have a $330,000 revenue from the sale of lands. In the past, council has declared land surplus. I received direction on surveying those lands and in fact creating lands. Today, a request for proposal was issued for realtor services. That request for proposal will close on March 8th. The goal is to retain a realtor, and we will be putting up for sale at least 5 building lots. These building lots have been surveyed and they have been appraised, so they are ready to go as soon as we have the realtor put in place. And that is the projected minimum revenue. And of course, we'll be communicating any of the listings with council in the future, as well as any offers that we may receive. So I'll turn it over to our treasurer to do the closing summary slide. Thank you.
Thank you. So as council will notice there is a total increased expected expenditures of $216,000. Salaries and benefits have gone up by approximately $100,000, and that's due to the addition of a community planner and the economic development officer, and both positions were previously approved by council. Purchase of services and equipment has gone up by $51,000 due to increased costs. Contracts and projects is coming in at about $122,000, and that includes the RED project that GM Haley just spoke to, along with the industrial park plan and the zoning bylaw. And then we also have initiated a $35,000 transfer to the planning and building reserves. And then you'll see there that taxation revenues, or sorry, non-taxation revenues have increased quite significantly from the 2022 budget, and that is largely driven by building permit revenue that came in well over budgeted amounts in 2022. So we have increased the 2023 budget. Again, it is increased only to a conservative level due to the higher interest rates that we are expecting in 2023 for residential building. So overall, the total estimated revenues is coming in at about $145,000 over what was budgeted in 2022.
All right, Councillor Bougie, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Hillet, for the presentation. My question is in regards to the fees that were recently passed in 2022. You had mentioned that we have 75% approximately recovered costs, getting towards that 100%. In that fee schedule, is there annual increases attached to that? Or, no, the reason I'm asking is I'd hate over years that we get behind and it stays at the same cost. So I guess that's the question. Maybe this is something that can be brought back at strategic planning, but I just had that question because, I mean, ideally, if we're essentially the tax base is subsidizing, if it's not 100%, if it's only 75%, I mean, ideally, in a perfect world, 100% would be ideal, so.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the fee bylaw did incorporate a cost of living increase, and in fact, it was already adjusted for 2023. So any new permits that have been applied for it, that has already been put in place, and the treasurer assisted in making sure that we were applying the correct increased value. So yes, it's completed.
I had a question. I don't know if it can be answered now, just in case. So 75% cost recovery increase 2022. Do you know what it was in 2021 or before, approximately?
No, Mr. Mayor, I don't know that off the top of my head. However, it has improved with the new fee bylaw from 2022. And we also, our treasurer spoke about a new comprehensive fee bylaw being prepared for 2023. So we do anticipate higher increases in revenue for planning applications as well.
Great. Just on, and it was mentioned before, and I didn't think of it, but with the $330,000 of one-time funding, that's great for like a softening this year, but we can't expect that in following years. I'm correct about that? Okay, so that's a nod yes, just for people who are on the cameras. And then, do you have any concerns for that long term? Because I know sometimes administrations like soften tough years like this, and I'm okay with that. I just like, is there a concern in the future? Because it would essentially be a 3% increase without trying in 2024 to us, because we won't do it yet.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. So in 2023, we have been quite lucky that we are getting this $330,000 that will be a positive, a reduction rather to the levy requirement. However, we are expecting that with the passing of a new comprehensive fees bylaw in 2023, that will be able to offset some of those reduced costs, and we are expecting some increased costs through recreation as through the comprehensive fees bylaw as well, and increased increased usage is what I meant to say. So we are expecting some of those costs to be offset.
Great, it's just one of those things you don't want to walk into unknowingly. For the land sale, I would say just remember in the contracts when we sell, please put plus HST. And then for economic development, the BRE, I could take that particular project or leave it at the whims of council, but that's something we can discuss at next meeting. I just wanted to float that out there in case anybody had any feelings either way. Okay, then seeing no other comments, we'll bring up Parks and Recreation, or would council like a 5-minute, if it's okay, 5-minute recess to stretch their legs, or do you want to go through Parks and Recreation right now? Okay. Carry on? Okay. After Parks and Rec, we'll take a break then. Mr. Jane?
So just so council is aware, we do have a tax overhead Excel sheet. So if council does decide to make any amendments to the 2023 budget, we can do so here and see what the overall levy requirement decrease or increases and what the overall residential rate increase or decrease is for 2023. So if council would like, we can conduct that exercise tonight even.
May we just go back to that slide? Can you,
Sure.
on the residential one, the residential increase, can you just highlight where that is so whenever we go to that one, we can see it very easy? So, yeah. And can you make it just a touch bigger for those? I remember when Mayor McLeod told me to make things bigger, and I kind of chuckled at him. Here I am with glasses asking the same thing 5 years later. So right now, we'd be sitting at 6.96% tax rate, and growth, if I saw there, is 94,000. Okay, thank you very much. So, and then thank you for that that reminder. So we'll go to Parks and Recreation. Ms. Servage?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we'll start off with our 2022 project highlights. So we had our Parks and Rec master plan. This is also an overview of what was presented back in December to overview what we accomplished. We also had park development at the Glen Walter waterfront, tree management projects. So that picture is actually our tree planting event that took place at Glen Walter this past fall. Lancaster Legion Deck Project, Loyalist and Nor'Westers Museum, we did some work there. Here we had a lot of work done, so the arena floor and dasherboard project, dehumidifier replacement, chiller maintenance, we accomplished a sponsorship agreement, park upgrades, so Glen Walter, North Lancaster, and my apologies, it's actually at Ken Barton Park that we did the bocce ball court. I'm not sure why I put Martintown Community Park, but it is in Martintown. And then Peanut Line, we did some maintenance, signage, and also finished off the bridge by County Road 17. And at Smithfield Park, we added a few amenities. If you can go to the next slide. So this is the 2023 capital overview. So this was presented at our last capital budget meeting, but it is, I'll just go through it quickly. The paint room here at the rec center, the Peanut Line study, a condenser for our refrigeration plant, some work at the museum on the kitchen, MP Poirier Park upgrade, Summerstown Estates Parkland landscaping, a drainage project here at the arena, Karen View Park concept plan and future development. And then the last one that wasn't actually at the at our last budget meeting is the Karen interpretation site, which is 100% funded through Parks Canada. I'm working on an agreement with them and Akwesasne to do consultation for a Karen interpretation site, which will be the $50,000, and then we will also be getting another $50,000 for the other portion of the project, which will be the actual interpretation site. So that's what we're working on right now, currently. Now for 2023, for the operating budget, first item that isn't listed on this slide, but I will speak to it. We are looking for another full-time facility operator. Some history on that position. So in 2020, we had 6 full-time operators, and as of now, we have 4 full-time. So there was some turnover during COVID, and those positions were not filled due to the pandemic. But our department is now back in full force post-pandemic, and we are struggling staffing-wise, and it's important that we bring our staffing levels back up. So this would mean that we would have 5 full-time operators whereas in 2020 we had 6. So we feel this will help us. This will be important in order to operate our department properly, in order to meet service levels, service level demands, as well as maintenance to our facilities and other requirements that are coming down from upper levels of government like asset management. The item here, so tree management. This is actually leftover from the 2022 budget. So no major projects, excuse me, no major projects, but we do have trees marked at various parks for removal. And we're finding now that cleanup after windstorms and stuff is more significant because of the ash borer. Tree management is going to continue to be a big part of Parks and Recreation departments, and I feel it's important we continue to budget for this ongoing park maintenance. The next item I just wanted to highlight was our utilities at our facilities. So heat and hydro rates continue to increase, so we've increased those budgets to reflect that at our facilities. The next item is the Charlan Rec Center floor scrubber. So we do have one in Martintown that it's pretty much done. If we keep it, we'll end up spending more money just in replacement parts and maintenance. So than what it's worth. So we will move the one from here over to Martintown, and then we will purchase a new one for this facility. Another item is a hypo pump for the water system at Martintown. So Dylan from our water department has advised that we are in need of a new piece of equipment, so this is the replacement. The next item is flower bed maintenance at Ken Barton Park, which is actually the park that's located at the Martintown Community Center. If you could go to the next slide for a second. Thank you. There are currently 11 flower beds in the lower part of Ken Barton Park. The township staff spent a large portion of last summer maintaining these flower beds, and it's not manageable. If you've been there, you will know these flower beds are quite large. We do take on quite a few horticultural items and support the Horticultural Society, specifically in Martintown, quite a bit. For example, we provide support with the flower boxes that are installed on the bridge. We provide assistance with the work that they do on the flower beds that are around along the community center up by the parking lot. After conversations with the Horticultural Society, it was determined that they cannot maintain the flower beds at the bottom of this hill, and we can't either. So I'm proposing that we eliminate a majority of them, and the ones highlighted in yellow we will keep. So the $7,500 will just allow us to remove the flower beds in red and ensure that there's topsoil and seed in those areas once we remove them. And then we will be installing cloth in the other flower beds and remulching to ensure they will require minimal maintenance. So last year I know we had students, they would take a couple weeks maintaining them, and then by the time they were done doing the last flower bed, then the first one was growing in with weeds. So if we did this proper maintenance, then hopefully we would just have to maintain those ones in yellow, like in the spring, maybe once throughout the summer, and then at the end of the summer. It's just really gonna cut down on our maintenance there, and it's a one-time cost. The other item, if you were to go back, thank you, peanut line maintenance. So this will be to maintain the trail, any resurfacing required after the spring and fall, and then the larger ruts that we experience. Originally, we had budgeted $70,000, and we were going to resurface a section, kind of like what I believe we had been doing over the last couple of years, to continue what we were doing. But we were advised to, we wanted to cut down our budget a little bit, and this is where we did that. So the $30,000 will just be to do our regular maintenance and any emergency items that come up, and possibly some additional signage. Another item on here is programs. So we're happy to announce we will have our full suite of programs back this summer, with ball hockey returning now that the floor project is complete. And we will also be adding a T-ball program to Martintown, as residents inquired about that last year. The last item I just want to bring up is Jack Donaher Park. So this is in Baynesville. And we'll be looking after this facility more because there has been a turnover in their association members, and they are looking to get more support from the township. And I think we have a positive working relationship started. So this is great news, but I think we will be taking on more maintenance than we had in the past, or maybe things that we didn't have to look after before. So I do see an increase in maintenance costs for this facility for that reason. I think, yeah, so if our treasurer could go over the financial numbers.
Thank you. So starting off with our expenditures, so we are expecting approximately a $1.5 million reduction in total expenditures on parks, recreation, and culture, including a $125,000 reduction in salaries and benefits, even after adding the one full-time operator position. You'll see that there's minor reductions to purchase of services and equipment and contract maintenance and utilities. And on the utility side, there's a reduction even taking into account the above inflation pressures on hydro and heat for our buildings. Capital expenditures, you'll see, has reduced by about $1.4 million, and that is because the arena floor project is now completed. So like I said, overall, we've reduced the budget by about $1.5 million from 2022. As far as revenues are concerned, we are expecting a little bit extra revenue from fees and user charges. However, we have budgeted them at conservative levels. We are expecting increased usage of our facilities now that we are officially fully now out of COVID. We are expecting a little bit from government grants, about $30,000, as a few expenses related to the arena floor project are still yet to be incurred, and they will be incurred in 2023. And so that's ISIF money budgeted there. And then we have our transfers from reserves coming in to offset capital costs. So in total, we're expecting about just shy of $1 million in recreation revenues.
Okay, Councillor McDonnell had a question.
Thank you for your, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation, Ms. Servich. Just one point I wanted to bring up. I'd seen it. This was just in a one-on-one I had the opportunity of having with Jane. Karen View Park, you're budgeting $50,000 for future development and concept plans. I believe we have a reserve fund that we could maybe empty and put that into. I'm not necessarily saying pull that 50 off of the budget. I'd like to see that 50 maybe remain, but there is some additional money in the reserve structure for, I think it was for, well, specifically for that development, I think more for the road system, but at this point in time, I see more benefit in putting it into the park and maybe taking some extra steps and moving forward with some granular in that park as far as we're going to need at some point a parking lot there and whatever the concept plan turns out to be.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could just respond to that. So the Cairn View Park concept plan and future development is being 100% funded from the Cairn View Park Reserve, and as such is a net zero to taxation.
Perfect, thank you. The other thing I wanted to comment on was the Jack Danhart Park. It's good to see that we're building a better relationship down in Banesville. It's a phenomenal park down there. It's a phenomenal facility. I grew up playing down there all the time. I'm glad to see that the township's going to be able to provide some more services down there, and I guess that'll bring me to the we won't call it an addition of a staff member. We'll call it, we got lucky and we didn't have to replace that staff member at the height of COVID. I think that given everything we've been doing and all the changes and the money we've invested in parks, I mean, we have Summerstown Estates, I think, has been mentioned in here as well. We've got the MP Poirier Park that we're going to be investing some dollars into as well. There's a lot of work going on within our municipality on the Parks and Recreation side, and I know it's one thing that the average resident really appreciates, and maybe appreciated even more by those with young children, the park side especially, and our user groups. So I have no issue at this point replacing that employee that we probably hadn't replaced. Well, didn't have the need, and this is probably our first hockey season, I'd say, that we haven't had shut down restrictions and closed the arena. So that staff member's probably being missed, given that we had 2 more than we currently have back in 2020, and I guess, have been able to get away the last 2 years, given all the shutdowns and the pressures on recreation that way, as opposed to what you're now facing. So I appreciate your budget, and thank you to you both.
Deputy Mayor Lang, then Councillor Jaworski, and just your microphone's on, just so you want to whisper and get caught on camera.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Just to add to Councillor McDonnell's, I want to say we appreciate the last couple of years that we were able to save a couple of salaries at the arena, and I think it helped out during COVID, that, you know, for our budgets, and I appreciate the fact that you're asking for one to be replaced rather than both at the same time in this year of tight money. I'll just add another thing that I thought of when you were mentioning the peanut line. And from the fire department side, I very much appreciate the mile markers that are now on the line. I know it's likely a joint effort between you and the chief, and likely GIS as well. I'm not exactly sure how you guys got it done, but it's nice that they're there for us now to, just if somebody calls in an emergency, we can find them a little easier.
Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you, through you, Mayor McDonald. Thank you, Ms. Servidge. I did want to just highlight, again, commend you for your budget, you know, your 2023 budget being, you know, markedly tighter than the 2022 budget. I know that your team works very hard to get ahead of things and do good preventative maintenance, and it definitely looks like all your efforts are paying off. And to the point, you know, the issue of bringing back on an operator, you know, filling a position that's been essentially empty for a little while now. I also thought it was worthwhile mentioning that also pre-COVID, you also had 2 part-time people. So, and you're not like, and we don't have part-time today. So, again, you know, your group is running very, very efficiently. And another thing I wanted to point out is, you know, that, and this is, I think, is a really good thing, is that I think, you know, there was a time where we became more focused on certain areas of the municipality, you know, certainly Williamstown, getting a lot of the attention, having, you know, the big, you know, having the rink. But I know, you know, over the last little while, you know, we've invested time and energy in the Green Valley Recreation Center and our facilities in North Lancaster as well. And I think, you know, I think it's fair to say that historically those have been areas that we've sort of neglected. And so I think it's really good that now we're starting to spread, you know, out and ensure that we're serving all members across our community. And again, and now you mentioned Jack Danaher Park in Baynesville, and I think that again, that's just again an extension of ensuring that we are providing, you know, those kinds of services all across the township and supporting our community groups who need our support, and taking care of our buildings to ensure that they last a long time and are well maintained. So again, thank you for all your efforts in that, and I look forward to continued good work in the Recreation Department. Thank you.
Councillor Bougie?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you again, Mr. Rich, for the presentation. As to comment on the position, I mean, it seems like you were running a little thin. It does make sense to replace that position so that things can maybe run a little more smoothly, which is great to see. Every time I come in for free skating with my son, there's always someone there to help out when needed, so it's great to see. My first question is in regards to the peanut line study, $45,000. Where are we with that? Because I know it was left out of the recreation master plan. But I mean, I guess what is the goal? What are you looking to get out of that study? Because it seems like a lot of money for something that we're probably, like, the uses to me seem suitable at the moment. So I guess what is the goal of that study?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, this was an item that we discussed at our capital budget late last year. Sorry, I don't have all of my points in front of me, but that it's essentially like a consultation process with all of the, including all of the users that use the peanut line, all of the properties that are up against the peanut line, because we need to figure out what the future is of the peanut line. it runs from one end of the township to the other, which is a great asset, but we also have a lot of issues with, you know, going across the peanut line or farmers' properties trying to go over across the peanut line. So there's a lot of issues that need to be resolved if we're going to keep maintaining it, even for safety reasons. So I think this process will allow us to have the proper consultation, and then that consultant can also provide council with options of how to move forward with the peanut line, whether it be proper agreements with each landowner, or, you know, possibly selling off a section of the peanut line. I'm not sure, but it's just, they need to provide us with the options of how to move forward. It's kind of been, ever since I started, it's been an issue, and it's been brought up to me that, you know, we were supposed to be doing a peanut line study for years now, and now this is something that, you know, with the master plan happening last year, I wasn't able to, with all the projects we had, I wasn't able to take it on, so now it's something that we're going to try to do this year.
I just have one more question. Thank you for that. In regards to MP Poirier Park upgrade, which is great, $60,000 allocation, is that a similar number to what was provided in North Lancaster? Is that how you got that number? Is it going to be a similar kind of replacement? And how is it with the user groups and through consultation with them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, that is the same amount as North Lancaster. We kind of just, for our neighborhood parks, larger neighborhood parks, that seems to be the amount that will get us a good-sized neighborhood play structure. Regarding consultation, I actually met with the group one evening last week to discuss what they would like to see or what their fundraising efforts are. There are other items at the park that they're interested in fundraising for. So we have started that process of consultation. The RFP was actually issued for this park today, and so we will be involving the group the entire process and also working with them if there's any fundraising efforts from their side.
If I just may ask the question, I don't know if anybody has a question. It's more of a curiosity one. You said this, salaries and benefits went down. I'm just curious as to how that was done, just inquisitive in nature.
So through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so when we conducted salary planning analysis for 2023 budget, we noticed that there were a few items that were budgeted in 2022 that didn't need to be carried forward into 2023. So for example, there was about $60,000 budgeted into other payroll payments and bonuses line that didn't need to be carried forward into 2023. And so we were able to find those types of efficiencies for things that, again, we're not expecting to be incurred in 2023. And so, yeah, through the detailed salary planning, we were able to reduce the salaries budget by about $125,000 while adding one additional operator.
And just to borrow other council's term, is returning one additional operator, and yeah, that's like the unicorn, is whenever you can deliver better service at less cost. So like, I believe that's nice. Councilor McDonnell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just something that had come up through Councilor Bougie's comments. I do not like paying consultants for simple, well, I won't call them simple things, for some of the smaller things. On this peanut line study, I did not like this at the start. I'm starting to get my head around maybe there is a value to this, especially if maybe we have an opportunity to look at the relationship that the municipality currently has, especially with landowners, we'll say on the east side, because I suspect there's a group in the municipality I would say would be interested in purchasing part of it. There's probably a group that doesn't think it's that we should retain the entire piece, and then there's probably another section that people think there's probably half of it that is of good quality. So I hope we can explore some of those difficult parts that we as a municipality would have a hard time gathering those information. Because I think if you just went around the table at council, we could come up with quickly enough with what we'd like to see for it. But I think it'd be good to get the individual landowners, not to say that they have more of a right to say what goes on with the peanut line, but that they have maybe more of a vested interest, as do we, because there are sections of the peanut line that are frankly beyond repair in spots just from years of, I guess degradation, lack of maintenance on them. Anyways, so I hope we can get a good idea of, cost effectively what is an option, and if we're gonna keep it and ignore shortcomings, what's that gonna cost us if we were to just focus on better parts of it? But I think it's just making sure the consultant is doing the work that we are incapable of doing at this point, which would be to go out and reach those individual landowners.
All right, thank you. So that's a slight change of pace from our December meeting, if I recall. Thank you for bringing that forward. So we will then take a moment. I'm seeing no other questions of recreation presently. So we'll take a health break. We will return. It is now, I don't have a time on here, sorry. It's now 7:36. We'll return at 7:50. We'll say 7:50, 14 minutes. Welcome back to our 2023 budget meeting. We are now into water and wastewater draft budget. Ms. McDonald?
Thank you. And council, you may know that infrastructure, including water and wastewater, is about half the budget. So we're halfway through the meeting. Buckle up. Yeah? No? No, we hope to be far more efficient than that. So our first slide is highlighting our 2022 accomplishments. And in this, I mean, there's some fun stuff at the top about initiating our studies and our design for our capital projects. But I really want to emphasize how lucky we are to have the operators that we do. Bullet number 3 is in 2022, we hired 2 new operators to maintain a staffing level of 3. So just, I know council is well aware of the struggles that we have in water. We're a training ground for larger municipalities, and the staff that we do have, just a huge thank you to them because they've been working their butts off all year. We've had a number of main breaks earlier in 2022. At times, we were only 1 operator when we were 2 and 1 was on holidays. So 1 operator basically running the plant with our director. And then that's a challenge for anyone. So despite all that, we had 100% MECP compliance approval for all our facilities, which is incredible. And we responded to everything that came at us adequately. Like, I couldn't have asked for more. So really, my 2022 accomplishments are our staff are great, and they do the work. And I just always take time to publicly acknowledge them. We also, not on this list, completed a water service delivery review in 2022. It was presented in February, so this council didn't get to hear. I know it was quite a long presentation, but I thought it was a good one. And I just thought I'd reiterate that from that service delivery review, they did think that our water team would be best served with 3 full-time operators, a senior lead hand, a quality management person, plus our director, so we're a director and 3, and they thought a director plus 5. Just as a kind of reminder. So going into 2023, on the water side, I'm just going to continue on that staffing, since that seems to be the theme of the day. In the water department, we are proposing 2 contract positions, 6 months each, to assist us in dealing with some of our preventative maintenance that's fallen by the wayside when we haven't had enough people. So we've been operating our plants, we've been maintaining the plants, but when you get out into the fields, our distribution system, that's where we're a bit behind. So we're not proposing, new people forever, just for this year and perhaps, well, yes, forever, but we'll start with this year and then see how it goes and see how much we can do and if it helps us, because we really don't know. In terms of our capital highlights, we all know about the environmental assessment that we hope to wrap up this year. We are hoping to finish the design of the water tower and get it out to tender, so that will be super exciting. And then the Lancaster Lagoon dredging. In December, we talked about this. This is taking the sludge out of the lagoon and just piling it in our inactive lagoon. I believe it came at a cost of $70,000 as an estimate. And if council is really paying attention, they would have seen that RFP was released today. So we're hoping to have numbers in I think March 22nd was our closing date. We were targeting the April 3rd council meeting to bring a number to council as to what that may cost. Operational highlights, these are one-time things that we're doing this year, captured under the various operational budgets. So we want to get a new Allen panel in Glen Walter, a dehumidifier in Lancaster, a well pump in Redwood, and those are all planned for over the years. So we'll get those done this year, and then hopefully won't have to go back to them for a good long while. The dry sludge haulage from Green Valley, that's a carry forward from last year. We just didn't have the people to undertake it. So it is taking out the dried sludge from beside the lagoons, and we have approval to use it as cover at our Beaverbrook landfill site. So that's what that project would be, and also our wastewater CCTV work. And that is to continuing the work that we started last year with our meter readers. So it is identifying infiltration in our systems, and it will help us update our condition assessments for our asset management. Our last CCTV, I believe, was done in 2018, so we're about 5 years later, and it's a good time to finish it, or to refresh it, not finish. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Mr. Jane.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. So as you can see there, the overall expenditures for the water and wastewater side is actually increasing by about $1.8 million, and that's largely driven by the capital expenditures. So the two capital expenditures that are budgeted for in 2023 are the Glen Walter Water Tower and Water Main Replacement Project at approximately $1.3 million of cost to be incurred in 2023. That is a project that is funded through ISIP funding, and so you'll see a corresponding government grant revenue there of about $953,000. The rest of the costs that are due to be incurred in 2023 will be funded through the issuance of a long-term debt. And so the long-term debt revenue is coming in at just under $350,000. Operationally, salaries and benefits are going up by $47,000, and that includes the 2 6-month contracts for water and wastewater operators. And as council is aware, all of these expenditures are fully cost recoverable through the fees and users charges that are charged to each individual system. And as such, the water and wastewater budget presents a net zero to taxation. So if there's any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
All right, I'll start off just with a, okay, we'll go to Councillor Jaworski. Oh, okay, thank you. I try to go around the field first. So with the lagoon, do you know, or I shouldn't, it might be a recommendation just to contact other municipalities, because I understand that others may be doing it at the same time. I don't know if it would decrease the cost of mobilization, but just put that bug in the ear. And then for CCTV, as we're doing many, is there a design, because I believe former Mayor McLeod would say, like do it in quadrants, you know, like get into that schedule so that we're not doing it, you know, every 5th year. We're kind of doing a little bit here, a little bit there. And I don't know if there's an advantage to do it all at once. I'd just like your thoughts on that versus say a little bit here and there.
I know that North Glengarry certainly does it in pieces, so that I can't remember what number of years they do it over, but they seem to think that works quite well. It's something that we could look at if council would not prefer to not have I think it was $80,000 we were estimating to do it all at once, but yes, it's a good idea. It's just our data is so old, and we're really trying to ramp up right now we're really trying to marry our asset management with what's under the ground and what's on top. And I mean, if we'd already been doing it staggered, it would be okay, but it's a bit challenging now. I think this is like a funding discussion for you. What level of funding are you comfortable doing? And I think Mr. Jane said it can be accommodated in the rate increases that were pre-approved by council.
So
My comment, if I may, just wasn't so much to start it now. It's just like once we get the data to continue it that way might be simpler.
Sorry, and I apologize. I didn't through you on the last one, Mr. Mayor, but through you. No, I don't. Point of procedural order. If it's you speaking to me, Mr. Mayor, do I need to speak through you, or can I speak directly back?
You can speak directly back, I believe, because it's through me to another councillor.
Thank you for the clarification. So, Mr. Mayor, I would love to get onto a rotation like that moving forward once we have a big bang approach in 2023. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. McDonald, for walking us through the water and wastewater budget. One thing I'd like for you to touch on is, you know, we do have a lot of, you know, there are items coming, and, you know, you and yourself, Mr. Jane, have said that, you know, the operation of the system is covered by user fees, but one of the issues we did have, you know, that was an election issue, I guess, in 2018 was, you know, that there had been a very significant increase in water rates that I think it's fair to say the users found was quite large and quite a surprise. And so I just want to ensure that, you know, what we're seeing, like that in terms of the planning that's been done so far, you know, with what the information you have so far, that the rates, you know, that have been approved and they're in place now, that you don't foresee us getting into a situation like that again, at least as best as you know, that we're on the good track. Or if we're not, then you'll let us know as soon as possible.
So through you, Mr. Mayor. So we do have 4 water and wastewater systems within the township. So some water and waste, 6, sorry, if we separate out the water and the wastewater. So depending on the area, each system sort of has its own level of financial sustainability. For example, the Lancaster system has about $2 million in its reserves, and so through the fees and user charges and through the reserves, we are able to appropriately life cycle cost some of the assets there. However, the Glen Walter Reserve is insufficient at this point to be able to fund any sort of future capital projects that may be incurred or that may happen due to the Glen Walter system. That being said, all the operational costs of the 6 systems can be funded through the current fees and user charges. And so our fees, our water rates bylaw does say that all our fees are supposed to increase by 3% each year. And that will be able to fund our operational costs. Of course, as you'll see there, we do have a transfer to reserves in the 2023 budget of $244,500. And so what you can take that to mean is that we are currently 245,000, call it, less in operational costs than what the fees and user charges are currently bringing in across the 6 systems. And so that money then gets transferred into the appropriate reserves. That being said, any sort of large capital projects will have to be funded through other means. If a capital project is under $2 million for the Lancaster system, it can be funded through the reserves.
Okay, may I just, something that came through my job experience was they did a water wastewater review, and something that's nice, and I think this is an ideal thing, and maybe council will have some thoughts on it, is knowing what that sustainable amount is. Like, so in South Dundas, say it was not 1.9 million is what finance says is sustainable, and presently it's contributing at just say $1 million. It's nice to have that number, because then council can make that decision, like, okay, we need to fund $900,000 more. Let's get there, and let's start our 4-year cycle, and let's put it for 10 years and hope the next council picks it up, because it just really gives you that nice goal mark of where we ideally should be, where we are, and then if we increase or decrease services, you can change it. So through that financial plan, maybe it's a touch to that too, is those goals are great for council and for the community, because then you have that target, you have your actual, and then everything goes into the reserve and you fund out. And I think you were driving at that during our first meeting or something like that. I find it handy, and I don't know if other council would find something like that handy, but it's more like like you're going to do the projects, you just put it in the reserve out, and sets it in the budget. So I don't know if that's something that the rest of council would like to see, but I find it very very simple and easy to understand. Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure if I'm saying the exact same thing as you, but I think on principle, we both want to ensure that we have the best long-term vision that we have for the system, the best information, so that we can ensure that we're on top of issues as opposed to finding out about them too late.
Okay, seeing no other questions of council, we'll move to, I believe it's infrastructure next. Same people.
Thank you. See, we're moving right along. It's like a third of infrastructure in 10 minutes. I think my first slide is about a highlight of the 2022 solid waste activities. Solid waste management doesn't often have capital highlights, since our capital highlights would likely be improvements to our landfill. Yep, that's kind of all I can think of. We're purchasing a truck that I hope we do not decide to do. However, our operational highlights in 2022 for solid waste management, we went from 4 bags to 3 bags to 2 bags in terms of our garbage curbside collection, which I think was a huge accomplishment. And I know at the beginning of 2022 there were not a lot, but there were some vocal naysayers who would call the office and say, this is never going to work, it's going to be a disaster, and we'll see garbage everywhere. I wouldn't say we saw a huge amount. I suppose we only went to 2 bags recently, and it's still the winter months, but it seems to be going well. We haven't had a ton of complaints come in, so this is, I believe, a real win for South Glengarry. So I just applaud the previous council for moving this bag limit reduction forward, and I'm excited about it. I'd also like to, good feedback there, sorry. Maybe you guys can't hear that? Okay, maybe it's just me. In 2022, other exciting activities for us administratively, there has been substantial change in extended producer responsibility, not with Blue Box. And this is something that we do behind the scenes on behalf of the township, and it's with respect to things like tires and metals and electronics recyclings and hazardous wastes and so with the new legislative framework that's come in, there are ways that we can monetize some of these things that we're collecting. And I just want to give a shout out to our infrastructure coordinator who has worked through the fall on getting these programs in place. And it wouldn't have happened without that position. So again, another kind of kudos to having the appropriate staffing levels. And we'll have more information on those kind of programs coming forward, but they are already providing us with, small revenues, but revenues we didn't currently or previously have, and a way for us to dispose of things in an environmentally responsible way. And that's kind of our highlights in 2022. Looking forward to 2023, again, really no capital highlights. We do have a few operational things that we're hoping to tackle. Beaverbrook, it may surprise council to know, and I know Councillor Jaworski is aware since she sits on the previous and current environment committee, but our landfills, our waste mounds, you can't just chuck garbage in it however you feel. You have an approved footprint and an approved contour. So it's both ways, and our contours sometimes are out of whack, so we have some substantial, like earth, but garbage moving, to get our contour back into shape in Beaverbrook. And we're out of compliance, and we know that because we do topographic studies every second year at each landfills, and then it goes to the MECP. Yeah, I said that right. And then they report back and say, hey, you're out of what you've been approved for, and you need to push stuff around. We are also hoping to improve our landfill operations through some increased supervision, improved digital documentation, and a refresh of the landfill operations manual. And I think that would, and then some of our policies with respect to the landfill, which I think will satisfy council's desire to know what's going on and what's happening. Our slides are going crazy. So, okay, and this does come, I won't say it's an increased staffing, but it's the transfer of a part-time position into a full-time position to have our own staff at the landfill when it's open as a landfill attendant, and just dedicate someone that we already have on staff to being at the landfill and getting these kind of housekeeping issues sorted out at both Beaverbrook and North Lancaster. And again, of course, adapting to the changing legislative landscape with respect to extended producer responsibility, which when I came on board of the township, I didn't realize how new it was. I assumed everybody knew what was going on and didn't understand that, no, I was kind of the only one. So I apologize to council for not bringing you along on my journey, because I, in fact, thought that I was incredibly behind where I was on the vanguard. I think the next slide hops right into roads, but I struggled with the budget, and I separated at the end it into roads and solid waste, because in my mind they're a bit different. And I'll just say that from my perspective, I am the general manager, I expend things, that's what I do. Mr. Jane funds things and council approves the funding. So I don't look into offsets as much as Mr. Jane, but the total expenditures for solid waste is 1.836 million of the total infrastructure budget, if that number kind of jives with council. Is it okay, Mr. Mayor, if I stop after solid waste and ask if there are any questions on these two before going into roads?
I think it's preferable, yes.
Yeah, reminding council that we did have a pretty robust discussion about the levels of service for solid waste in November or December. And so this operational budget matches those levels of service that you previously discussed.
Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you, through you, Mayor McDonald. I have two questions for Ms. McDonald. The first one being, and I foresee that in this budget there's no room for these kind of activities, but maybe in the next year, I just want to talk, plant a seed now for the future, like in terms of organics. I know once producer responsibility comes in, there will be, the cost of recycling will no longer be on us, and perhaps, some of that could go to organics. Or we still get lots of questions about the food cycler pilot, and I know that for those who have it, they all report a dramatic decrease in organic waste that goes into their, garbage. And again, that reduces the pressure on our landfills. So I think, I guess that wasn't a question, it's more of a comment. I hope that that's not something that's going to disappear. I just understand it might not happen this go-round. But my other question is, with the cost of fuel, I understand there's fuel adjustments in the waste contract. So I was wondering if you could speak to what the difference is, 2023 over 2022 on that one. Thanks.
I'll hit off 2 points. So one, food cycler, I was just informed that they've received another similar grant to the first funding opportunity. And I know at our next regional waste management meeting in 2 weeks, we are going to talk about what that might mean and how we can maybe bring that to our councils or consider doing something jointly as a multiple small municipalities. So that's number one. In terms of the fuel adjustment, my eyes aren't that good, but I believe the increase is $120,000. Yeah, so the increase directly related to fuel adjustment of our garbage and recycling collection is $120,000, estimated for 2023.
Deputy Mayor Lang, and Ms. McDonald, will you turn your mic off?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Back to that fuel adjustment, is that like a 20% increase in our, I'm trying to remember what the collection total was, but just for our, and for the public to realize just what our costs are doing, how much of a increase is it approximately?
So through you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of recycling, we were budgeted at $695,000. We came in at $807,000, which is a 16% increase over budgeted amounts. We're budgeting now at $835,000, which is a 20% increase to budgeted amounts.
I'm just going to add in on recycling. Some of that overage will be towards increased recycling processing costs of any extra recycling that we're collecting through weekly recycling. So that's garbage might be a little less.
Right. And then for garbage collection, again, through you, Mr. Mayor, we were budgeted at $555,000. Our actuals in 2022 came in at $595,000, which represents a 7% variance. And we're budgeting in 2023 at $620,000, which represents a 12% variance over 2022 budget.
Okay, thank you. So approximately, between the two, approximately 10% higher costs.
Yeah, and the great thing about that, just to tag along, is like that's without even trying, which is that 40-year. And that's why at the start we asked that percentage number, and like why I was okay probably at the higher end with Councillor Lang, because we're not even trying, and that's a hit to the budget. I did have a question, just and maybe this will be a question for the next budget meeting, if I may make a request. I'd be curious to have a slide or two prepared about just the changing of the transfers of to reserves, just to highlight them, because going through the information, like on the very low level, is great, but I think it would be good to show like the aggregate, just because things are changing. That's fine. I mean, sometimes we have to move reserves to satisfy different years. I just think it'd be nice. So that's for next meeting. I just didn't want to forget it before I got there. Are there any other questions about solid waste management? And Councillor Jaworski, were you satisfied with the food cycler answer? Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to infrastructure. It's infrastructure.
Thank you. Hang on. All right. Here we go. So, oh, did we skip a slide? Thank you. So the slide that council sees now is a highlight of our 2022 activities. Everyone always talks about our capital stuff. We certainly did a lot of it. As Mr. Jane said, we maybe did too much of it in terms of a dollars and cents perspective, not necessarily from an infrastructure perspective, and that's okay. Well, in terms of our operational highlights, I'm pretty light on this slide because I didn't really know what to say. Like when I say we met and exceeded all our approved levels of service, that's a lot of work to our crews, and it's a huge accomplishment. You know, it includes our roadside mowing programs, our grading, not just the granular overlay, but the regular maintenance grading. It includes all of our signs, our culverts. Like, there's a whole plethora of work that goes into meeting and exceeding our approved levels of service. I don't want to write them all out, but hopefully anyone watching can appreciate that first bullet under operational highlights is 12 people in the winter and kind of 10 in the summer working their butts off, really. Exciting, we moved into our new airport road facilities. So our Fire Chief Robertson has been working on the former Public Works garage, but that means we had to go somewhere, and this is where we went. We moved in, I believe, in May, and so far it's been a bit of a bumpy ride, I won't lie, but it's a nice facility, and we hope to continue to make it our home. We did a lot of culverts last year, Heron and McGilvery. We subbed out a bunch on any of the linings, but we replaced a significant number in-house, and that was a massive accomplishment for our staff who haven't had the opportunity to do that much work in-house before. And I think at first it was fun, and then it became kind of a grind, as you can imagine. And the cloud-based complaint tracking software, that's been working out really well. We've trialed it in infrastructure, so residents can online send their complaints or the concerns or their inquiries in through our E11 software. And when they call in, only right now for infrastructure, we log it, and it is assigned a case number, and we can kind of track and search. And we found that to be really beneficial because we have people often, they'll come in and Ms. O'Shaughnessy knows, they'll come in through Facebook, they'll call in through the front desk. I say Ms. O'Shaughnessy because she's our communications coordinator and takes the brunt of our online social media communications. So thank you so much. I assume much of that is infrastructure. So just when things are coming in all over the place, the software allows us to kind of keep a handle on it and stop some of the he said, she said, they said, because it gets kind of tough, and we can really, anyways, that's a small thing, but I really liked it. So again, appreciating my staff and hoping to, am I supposed to, part of this ask is bringing one of my part-times on to full-time. So not bringing in a new person, but showing respect to the folks that I hope are watching and are hearing all these lovely words that I'm saying about them. In 2023, we've got a lot of capital highlights to go through, and I wanted to relate this back to the budget presentation, and I'm sorry I didn't do that here, that we had in December. So ignore the slides. I'm just going to walk through the package that went out in December. We talked about the backhoe and the valve trailer, that is still a go and still included in this budget. In terms of the capital structures, we reduced the work and removed 2 designs. So we will still be doing work on the Cashin Road structure, the Chapel Road structure, a second line road structure, and an assessment of Butternut Lane. But through this particular budget, we've dropped the replacement design for Kinloch Road and the structural evaluation for one of the third line road structures. This budget still carries the replacement of the municipal drain crossing on concession 2 at Wesley Creek. It was I've budgeted at $200,000, but I am optimistic that we're going to come in under. But I'll wait and see how things play out. But that might be a good news story for us. We have axed the wharf renewal options analysis, deferred. We have scaled down the roadside safety study to be very teeny-weeny and sit within my existing consulting budget and use a student, so I should get the information and maybe some of my technical knowledge without the big price tag. And I think that is what some of the councillors were suggesting that we do. In terms of our capital roads works, that would be the reconstruction of Warren Middle and Bethune and Williamstown, and we've began that. The resurfacing and drainage improvements to Sabre and Anderson, which are much needed. The extension of McDonald Road up off of Kenyon Concession 1, which is needed. And then we have included the resurfacing of Second Line Road. And as Mr. Jane has explained, that would be through a debt financing model, I believe. And that would be one that would be, if council was cutting a project, I put that up as optional. We had also proposed the active transportation plan, which I was thrilled to have a resolution to enter into that funding agreement last night, so thank you. We had a sidewalk accessibility improvements, which we have removed. And I'm hoping that that active transportation plan may allow me to get some funding to do some of those projects without bringing it back to council. Well, it'd have to come back, but without asking, yeah, you got it, Councillor Jaworski. And we're carrying through our asset management capital projects, so the building condition assessments, the road lot rationalization study, and I believe that was, and a bit of extra money in case we needed to do a few more studies, but we reduced the total amount from 250 to 200,000. And I believe those were the capital projects as presented. So that sums up what's on the screen and relates it back to what was previously presented. So we have deferred and cut a ton of the projects, and I hope council is satisfied with what we've brought back forward towards you today. That's not English, but anyhow, operational highlights. We are maintaining our existing level of service for maintenance, so there are no increases or decreases, so to speak. There are some transfers between functional areas to meet the needs, so a bit more roadside spraying, a bit fewer culverts, but mostly status quo across the board, including maintaining the traffic calming budget that council had approved last year, which I'm excited to keep that successful, and we see a lot of use for that moving forward, especially as we become more technologically savvy and can use the cloud a bit better. We really are going to be focused on training this year. Our staff, we have 6 full-time staff, and they know what they're doing, and we have 4 to 6 seasonal staff. They also know what they're doing, but they're a bit, newer and greener. And since we want to continue to provide the service to our residents, training for the next kind of 5 years will be important. It's not an increase in our budget, but I noticed that we haven't been spending our training budget in roads, so I aim to spend it this year. 2 highlights is the installation of the enhanced Hamlet signage that was purchased through, I believe, the Economic Development Umbrella in 2021. So they were those fancy Hamlet signs. They're going to go up this year, and again, that RFP was posted earlier this week, so we'll know if my estimating is good or horrific in the very near future. And we're not carrying forward the money, but we're carrying forward the contract for the rural shouldering project that was initiated last year through the recommendation of the Roads Maintenance Plan Committee. And again, I'd already noticed the purchase of the backhoe. Now, before I bump on to the next slide, which would be Mr. Jane, or maybe if I do, I don't, maybe flip it, and I'm just going to, I'm not a finance person, and I don't think of my budget quite like this. So when I looked at that, I had no idea what I was looking at. And I have no doubt it makes perfect sense to the finance people of the world, like 0 doubt. So I'm just going to discount the revenues because, again, I expend. I'm thrilled to have revenues, but I'm a spending machine in infrastructure. At 9.472 million, 7.635800 are roads, if that helps. And I should have put percentages on my beautiful things. But a good chunk of that is roads maintenance. So 2.9 million goes to roads maintenance, and 2.2 goes to capital. My yards management, so looking after my buildings and my patrol yards, is 150,000. My kind of administrative, my consultants, my salaries is 2.18 million. And then my fleet is 145,000. In the past, council would have seen my budget with my staffing in my maintenance budget instead of kind of orphaned off in administration. I don't exactly know, but I would guess that pushes my road maintenance up to the maybe 4 million. Just so you're not thinking, like, in the past, my maintenance budget has carried the burden of my operational staff. Like, it would be distributed under mowing and stuff before it hit you folks. So it looks scary here when you see 2.18 to staffing, but it carries out to my maintenance operations, and it's really part of that budget. So I've rambled enough, and I will pass it on to Mr. Jane.
So thank you, Ms. McDonald. So I'd like to start off with the overall. So you'll see there that overall we have increased the infrastructure budget. So again, that includes garbage and recycling by $550,000 approximately. That includes a $330,000 increase to salaries to respond to overages that were incurred as part of 2022 actuals. And then also the inclusion of the conversion of one part-time or seasonal staff to a full-time and to a landfill attendant rather, and then one seasonal roads person to a full-time roads person. You'll see there that there is a reduction of about $780,000 to the materials, equipment, and consulting line, and a corresponding increase to then the contracts, fuel, and utilities by $720,000, and that includes the contractual increases to garbage and recycle, and then also the revised budgets for fuel and utilities. That and just to touch on fuel and utilities, since it affects the infrastructure budget more drastically than others, what we see with the fuel price index in 2022 is that it hit record highs in the summer, and then it started teetering off in September. So it was still high in August or so, and then it started teetering off and then leveling off throughout the latter half of the year. And that's what we're expecting through 2023 as well, is that it will remain high, but it is going to level off. So that's the fuel price index for Canada overall. Capital expenditures, we did increase the budget from about $1.8 million to $2.7 million, so that's an increase of about $900,000. And that $1.8 million figure, I want to be very clear, includes the $1.25 million that was budgeted as part of the roads capital offset reserve. So that is being used to fund 2022 overages for roads capital projects, and so we've included that as part of capital expenditures budget for an apples-to-apples comparison, because without that add, the capital budget was about $550,000. So an apples-to-apples comparison, we have increased it by about $900,000. The transfers to reserve has decreased by $665,000, and that includes a decrease to the landfill site reserve, and it includes a decrease to the roads, bridges, and structures reserve, as well as the roads equipment reserve. So what you'll notice there is the budget overall for infrastructure has increased by $550,000, and the reserve transfers have decreased by a similar amount. So financially, what that amounts to is, the reserves are being used to fund current year operations and capital costs. As far as revenues are concerned, fees and user charges have increased by about $100,000. Government grants have decreased, and that is largely due to the fact that we will not be having that one-time increase to the gas tax that we did in 2022. However, that is offset by some of the other increases to other funding sources, as well as the active transportation grant and things of that nature. We will be transferring in $300,000 from reserves and issuing debt of $900,000. So overall, our revenues have increased by about $400,000. And the issuance of debt, again, is for the Second Line Road project. If council approves that project, that'll be part of the budget. If not, then the long-term debt issuance will be taken off, and the debt repayment charges of $45,000 will be taken off as well off of the 2023 budget. Thanks.
Councillor Bougie.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Ms. McDonald, for your presentation, and thank you for walking us through quite a few items. Happy to see that you found some efficiencies and using our staff to complete some of the projects and work. That's great to see, so thank you for that. I guess my question isn't related to the active transportation plan road rationalization study. I'm definitely in favor of having that. Gives us kind of some long-term vision, I guess, that lays the groundwork for future roads projects. Can build it into our asset management plan. Do you think, in your professional opinion, that we should wait for that information back before committing to Second Line Road? Or do you think Second Line Road absolutely should be the next road to be done? Because to me, if it can wait and we don't have to take on any debt, that would be my preference if we're not getting it from reserves. But I just wanted to hear your opinion on that.
Excellent question, Councillor Bougie, and through you, Mayor McDonald. Okay, hang on here. Because you asked for my professional opinion, not just my opinion. I will say that likely Second Line Road, in any reshuffling or relooking of the roads, will be one of the next ones to come due. However, it will hold a year. It's not going to get any or much worse with one more year of use, but I don't think it'll switch as substantially in terms of priorities.
Councillor McDonnell and Councillor Jaworski.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Boucher's going to come and haul gravity boxes for me up the Second Line Road this fall, and he's going to tell me if it needs to wait or not. Now, I would agree with you, Jim McDonald. I think it is probably our worst hardtop road at this point, right up there with maybe Chapel Road. Yeah, it'll hold. I think at this point, we're only going to be doing subsurface damage to that road. I'm not a fan of borrowing it either. I'd rather fund it some other way through reserves, or somebody leave us a magic $900,000 pot of money on the township front door. But the other issue I'm also concerned about with that road is it will divert a lot of our heavy traffic over to it's our new road, but no sense pushing all of our heavy traffic to it, being it's that Third Line Road. Few things I want to look at. Personnel, it's essentially 2 people within your department that we're probably writing one as far as the employee that you're saying was seasonal. What would, I guess, seasonal would be 11 months, roughly 11 months, 2 weeks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, correct. I pulled my staffing records, and our seasonals are typically laid off for 2 to 6 weeks a year, depending on how many and what pressures we're under.
Okay, so I don't have any issues with that. I wouldn't call that. I would call that probably righting a wrong that should have been done. And in regards to the landfill attendant, I think we need better surveillance, as we've seen with neighboring municipalities, what it's going to be costing us, and we should be taking our landfill a lot more serious and having somebody there full-time responsible from the municipality that answers to us, as opposed to a contracted company it's essentially security guards. So I'm all right with that. Again, I like the comment that was made earlier. We're not, even if we were to change absolutely nothing, our costs are going up astronomically when it comes to fuel. And not to get into the weeds into your personnel and your jobs, but I don't know, it's maybe worth investigating some of our fuel pricing as well as, often these companies send out a morning bid, and if you got somebody who's looking at it, whether it's our roads manager or yourself or our coordinator who's looking at it, you can kind of typically see a day where it's worth filling up or things like that, and maybe just we should be addressing these things. I know, like we do at home, and a lot of my customers express that that's one of the things they now are watching, because day to day could be $15,000 difference on a fuel bill, depending on how much we're buying. We're adding we're replacing out a backhoe, which I know I've seen that backhoe a number of times. It's been highlighted to me, and it was one of the items that was highlighted to me when I visited the road staff for coffee one morning against my will. At the time, we were really looking at, former council was really looking at our fleet. Do we have any major concerns right now as far as equipment that is constantly breaking down? I didn't have a chance to look at GLs based on equipment or anything like that. Just wondering, do we have a truck that is coming to end of service late next year and we're going to be looking at surplusing or things like that? And the reason I bring this up is because we always hear, and I sympathize as somebody who responds to snow calls as well. These long storms can kill you. They just you lose your hours so quickly on a storm that starts at midnight and runs till midnight the following day or noon the day after. So it's getting to be very challenging. People are moving out to the countryside and traveling further distances for work. We get these calls, and that's a major increase in level of service to go to 24 hours. But whether there's route optimization and adding a plow, it might be worth looking at making those that plow purchase, you know, I'm not saying on this budget out of reserves, but in the future on, if we've got one that's gonna be changed out in 3 years, maybe change it out next budget, given our roads fleet, reserve is strong enough to accommodate that. I don't need that answer tonight. That could be in a subsequent council meeting or an email, whatever. It was just one of those things to consider, I think, as we're going forward, if we have some fleet issues.
Yeah, I think that might be a good item for strategic planning too, because like that, I mean, it would be a level of service increase considerably, but well mentioned. Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McDonald, I laughed when Councillor McDonnell mentioned the gravity box, because I think in jest, I mentioned to Deputy Mayor Lang that maybe we should invest in a gravity box for the township road crew, because it seems to be the most effective way to determine the condition of a road. But in terms of the snowplow routes, what Councillor McDonnell just mentioned there, I also would be very much in favor in taking a look at you know, if we, you know, what we could do there, maybe to slightly increase. I know that, and thank you for posting the routes on the website. I think that is a very handy thing for our residents to be aware of what the 10 routes are. But, you know, as we know, it's a very tight system, and if one unit is redeployed because of an accident or whatnot, it's felt immediately. So, you know, maybe there's a way for the future, but we could, you know, somewhat increase it so that maybe we have a little bit more slack when we do have to have, you know, deal with an emergency, but also that, you know, on non-emergency situations, we could provide a bit better level of service for the folks who are moving to South Glengarry and are not necessarily coming with a tractor and all that to deal with the snow that they might not be used to. To the landfill attendant, I think it makes a lot of sense to bring that in-house, and it sounds like it's for quite minimal cost, considering that we have folks that are part-time that could be doing that sort of work for us. And I'm hoping also that it does provide a better level of service in some way to our residents, because I know that right now there's a lot of, you know, I'm hoping that as we move forward that there could be some bureaucracy removed out of going to the landfill, where if we have our own landfill attendant there, that they could help avoid some of the trips to the office that folks might need to do today to be able to access the landfill, to make it a better user experience and encourage people to, you know, not get frustrated if they, you know, as they're at the landfill or before they get there. My question, though, is, I think it's to Mayor McDonald and Deputy Mayor Lang about Second Line Road. I believe at the capital budget meeting, we had, you know, there was some talk of whether or not the counties might be taking that over with their road rush. Well, I forget the right term of what they're doing, you know, when they're looking at if roads should move between the counties and the township. I was hoping one of you could perhaps give us an update on whether or not there's any more information on that.
I'll let Deputy Mayor Lang do that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. We had a very informal chat. What I got out of it is that it's highly unlikely. Our traffic counts are not going to be anywhere near what they're looking for to do that road. Their county roads are to connect villages or hamlets to each other, and there is a hamlet at the north end, but those hamlets don't necessarily travel between each other that much. Mostly they leave to go to the 34 and to go to bigger hamlets. You know, not that there isn't some traffic, but it sounded highly unlikely that they would be very interested. And if it was to happen, it's not likely going to happen very quickly. It would be a long process, and the road's going to need to be done before that. And even if they did someday want to take it, they'd likely want it up to spec before they did, or at least in decent shape.
I can concur with that. That's exactly how I understood it too. All right, I know that there was some, like if we're trying to move something in direction, there was some, like you didn't really want Councillor McDonnell to take on debt. Councillor Bougie was looking to probably defer it to next year. I don't know how you feel on this side of the table, and I would, if I can give my opinion, because it's kind of committee of, oh, I don't have to wait, would be, I would prefer to defer it as well, and that's somewhat philosophical, plus I do believe it can wait. I'll just go over here to get the opinions, and then we'll come back to Councillor McDonnell. So Councillor Jaworski, then Deputy Mayor Lang. Councillor Lang, then Deputy Mayor Lang, and then Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you very much, and I am willing to go first. I've always been reluctant about deferring these projects because they usually cost a lot more the next year. And then, you know, and I'll use the example of the new roads garage and the fire hall. We had the money sitting in the account for several years before we went ahead and did them. We ended up doing some of those projects, or both of them, in the middle of COVID. Just imagine how much less they would have cost if we'd done them before COVID. We dragged our feet a little bit, and I think we paid the price because of it. So that's one reason that I hate to defer them. On the other hand, we had a conversation a year ago around this table, around this, well, like it was earlier, but it's during budget discussions about borrowing, and I was a lot more eager to borrow that year than I am this year. Interest rates were near all-time lows, and construction costs were not as high as they are. So we're in a different environment right now. Interest rates are as high as they've been for many, many years, as long as most younger people in this room can remember, likely. Some of us might remember the 20%. But, so, I guess I will be okay deferring it if you want, but if I was to defer it, I'm not wanting to take that money out of the budget and drop what our total budget is. I would want to put that money into reserve for bridges or something along those lines. That's my thinking. I'd like to keep that money in the budget, but well, I guess the boring part wouldn't be, it would only be the 45,000 then, eh? Correct. I saw Mr. McDonald go into his mic and I thought, well, I screwed up somewhere. But anyway, no, you're right, because we were not, but even the 45,000, I'd like to leave it in there. I don't want us to drop this budget too much, but you know, I know I'm the only one voice here, but I'm not much for, we're going to pay later. I'm telling you folks, we're going to pay later.
Councillor Jaworski?
Yeah, unless, did Mr. Jane want me, okay. Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'm glad Councillor Lang went first, because I'm glad that, sorry, Deputy Mayor, you brought up that, you know, this time last year, we were looking at borrowing, and we had very favorable rates, and fortunately, we weren't able to take advantage of that opportunity, and here we are, sort of a few steps back now. And so, but it's very hard to know where things are going. I don't want to make predictions on where the future is going in terms of, or how long it'll take, I guess, to stabilize, maybe. I think things are still a bit unstable. So I'm not fundamentally against debt. I think it definitely has its place. Perhaps part of what would make me feel a bit better is I know I would like to have a better understanding of our reserves, positioning, and sort of future planning. I feel like I know a lot of the way the budget's being presented now is a bit different, and I'm still trying to get my head around the reserve situation. But also, it hasn't gone out for RFP yet, right? There's been no like formal movement, and I'd certainly be open to some sort of situation where we, because I mean the $45,000 difference to the budget is not really, I mean it's a very small amount that I'd also be open to putting an RFP out to see where our price is in case, you know, to get a better sense of where the market is moving. But I guess what I'm saying is that I don't really have a strong opinion on one way or the other. I think either option is acceptable to me, to defer or to go with the debt repayment charges, or the debt repayment process. But I do feel like part of this discussion is getting a better handle on our reserves as well. So I would like that information, if possible.
Councillor McDonnell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll just clarify. I'm not against the borrowing either. I think you're swaying me your way, but I think I'll agree with my two council colleagues who were here with me before. I think we were beyond prepared to. I think we had asked for borrowing to have happened last year in the form of $4 million, but that's neither here nor there. The rates at that time were much more favorable, and I'll agree to that. The reason I would be okay with deferring it at this point would be if we feel we are going to receive a more favorable rate next year. as opposed to this year, because the rates with Infrastructure Ontario are locked into the term of the loan. So that could, you know, 1 year could save us quite a bit just in interest alone. That being said, 1 year could cost us more in inflation. And I'm going to put this out there that I don't think there's a way we can really say we're going to save to do this road. This road, to me, is beyond lifespan, especially in a few sections. The approach coming up to the bridge between the 6th concession and the landfill, even the hill coming up on the south side to the 7th is really rough. And there's some spots where it's getting to the point where it's undrivable / dangerous, which I don't think is acceptable for a hardtop road, especially a main road like that. But that being said, I don't know if there's a way we can do this road without borrowing it, and frankly, you know, we're talking a 9% increase on taxation just to do that road, so we're gonna cut every other department. I think borrowing for this road, or for many of these roads, is gonna be inevitable. So I'm not afraid of the long-term debt side of it. I think my only question I would have in this would be, and GM, we've had this conversation, the goal would be aggressive debt repayment. Is that 100,000 per year? Is that 150? Our minimum repayment charge is 45 on that road, but if you could give an idea of what would be a realistic term for payback on that if we were to take this road on.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, so the plan for repayment of the debt would be to engage in aggressive debt repayment strategies. It's a bit hard to predict how many years it would take to pay back that loan. However, in 2023, we would like to just service the debt charges. And then moving forward, the goal would be, if there's years that have any surpluses, for example, we would like to contribute those surpluses to pay down the principal of that debt. Going forward, in 2024 and beyond, we would like to not just service the debt, but also pay down some additional principal depending on what the taxation budget could allow and what council's appetite is for the aggressive debt payment strategy. But certainly if there's any surpluses at year end, our recommendation would be to put at least some of that towards principal repayments of the debt. So it's a bit hard to predict when the debenture would end or when it would come to maturity, but the administration's goal would be to engage in aggressive debt repayment.
So I guess maybe if we decide we need a subsequent meeting, and I guess maybe we technically will because we're committee of the whole and can't pass our budget, but we maybe agree to it in essence. Maybe at that point we could, when it did come back, we could decide at that point, but that could slow down our RFP process. But I guess I'm okay either way. I will agree with the other two council colleagues. I'm fine to wait if we feel that we're going to get a more favorable rate, but I just don't see where we can afford to do these roads on taxation anymore at, you know, a 9% increase to do one road. It's just not feasible. I think going forward we are going to have to look at options as far as debt debt. But yeah, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, I believe Councillor Jaworski had a question or a comment.
I do have a question because I'm sorry that this is maybe a bit of a basic question. In terms of Second Line Road, the timeline for doing it that's in the budget right now, could you walk through that one more time? Is it the entire, so it's the entire road but over 2 years? Is that correct?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the entire road is due to be completed in 2023 if council approves the project. The borrowing for the road will happen, the second half would happen in 2024.
Okay, but I mean, building on what Councillor McDonnell said, if one section of the road really is in bad shape, if we were to just do that one part of the road and similar debt repayment approach, what impact would that have?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, the debt repayment charges that's in the 2023 budget includes the issuance of $450,000 of debt. So if we could do one section for $450,000, that's the debt repayment charges that are in there right now. Then when the next issuance of debt hits the books, then the debt repayment charges will increase to likely around $90,000.
Deputy Mayor Lang?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. So your plan is to do the whole road, finance half it this year. Are you thinking that the other half is not going to be due till next year, or are we just going to carry that? I'm not 100% sure why we're financing 450 this year and 450 next year if we're doing the whole road this year. Just kind of, maybe, and we did talk about this earlier, I might have missed something, so I apologize if I did.
So again, through you, Mr. Mayor, so we're not projecting any cash flow concerns on the road, cash flow concerns for the organization. If council's will is to do the entire road at once, what we would do is, in effect, take some money from our reserves, put the money back into the reserves next year when the debt is issued formally. So we're not projecting any cash flow concerns, and so the entire project can be done this year. However, we would, in essence, borrow from reserves this year and then immediately pay it back through the 2024 budget. And in that sense, we only have to incur debt servicing charges of $45,000 this year. And then when the next issuance of debt hits the books, it'll incur the next $45,000 or whatever the interest rate ends up being for the next $450,000.
Thank you. It's much plainer now. So we're basically covering the other half ourselves for a year, saving a year's interest on that $450,000, and as the rest of society, hoping that interest is a little lower next year, which it may very well be, but we have no guarantee on that. But okay, I like the idea. I'm leaning towards leaving it in. Let's get it done. That's my thought.
Councillor Jaworski?
No, thank you, through you, Mayor McDonald. So if we did just half of it, we could do it all out of our reserves? Is that correct? Is that my understanding correct?
So again, through you, Mr. Mayor, we cannot do any of it through our reserves. Okay, the entire road has to be done through long-term debt. However, in order to be able to save debt repayment charges for the 2023 budget, and if, again, it's council's will to do the entire road in 1 year, what we would essentially be doing is just borrowing against our reserves for the year to ensure that there's no cash flow concerns in 2023 to do the entire road, and then we would essentially just pay it back into the reserves. So the reserves in 2024 would not be affected based on this project. However, that being said, the reserves cannot afford $900,000 of this capital project, right? So what we're basically doing is taking the money from the reserves and putting it back in 2024, and as such, our reserves remain untouched. The net effect is that we're saving 1 year of interest on the issuance of the debt. However, if we were to do the entire thing through reserves, unfortunately, the reserves won't be able to afford it.
And I'm sorry if I'm not following you, but if we only do half the road, because I mean, in your answer to me, I heard you say the whole road. If we only do half the road, then we could pay it all. If we only do half, we could pay the whole thing back next year. We'd have the debt repayment charges this year, and then we could pay the whole thing back. No.
No, again, so the reason we would be able to pay the whole thing back in 2024 is because we would borrow $450,000 in 2024 and then pay it back to the reserves. Correct.
I think it's just like a cash flow. Like, we have the ability to cash flow it, but it's not the treasurer's recommendation to use that money for longer term. So it would be like a cash flow borrowing. And if I may, we do tend to get, and I know I'm speaking for the deferment of it, so we do get better tenders earlier in the year. So now we might, like, I would be in favor if council so chose to do it, to defer it. If I don't know if it'd be out of turn to ask for an RFP now and be the first on next year's, because I'm sure all the tenders have been out from across municipalities, so there's not, the businesses aren't hungry for us right now. That is a consideration because that does come from our, I believe it came from the roads committee. They said one of the best things to save money is to get it out, and that's why we had our capital meeting early this year. So that's another thing that, again, there's so many variables that really, we don't know, we're not experts. So Councillor McDonnell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I've been thinking about that as well in the last few minutes. Just to clarify on Councillor Jaworski's side of this, were we to pull 450,000 out of our reserves to fund that project, we could still complete the IO loan for next year, assuming the rates came down, and potentially get a better rate and pay back our reserves next year with the money that we got from IO, correct?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, in that scenario, our reserves would take a hit of $450,000.
Okay. Short term.
No, long term. Okay, so the way that it would work is we're taking $450,000 from our reserves, or $900,000 rather, from our reserves to fund the road. This year, we're borrowing $450,000, and next year, we're borrowing another $450,000, right? So if we're only doing half the road, we could, in essence, take the money from the reserves this year, $450,000, issue the debt next year, $450,000, not do the next half of the road, and then save $45,000.
Would
All right.
you save
Now we're getting each other. Perfect.
Would you save $45,000, or would you'd be doing it in year 0 to 9 as opposed to 1 to 10?
The 2023, Mr. Mayor, the 2023 budget would save $45,000, and then the debt would then be issued in 2024.
Deputy Mayor Lang?
One more comment on it at least, maybe somebody else. Doing half a road, they're not gonna give you as good a price if you do the whole road. And they're gonna have to come back the next year and, sorry, are we considering that we're only gonna do half the road and we're gonna leave the other half for numerous years, which we're gonna end up with like what we had in the Glen Road there. We had a section in the middle that was terrible compared to the other two. Like, it's nice to have the whole thing, especially so that road really goes from one spot to another. There's not half of it that's driven more often. When people get on it, they tend to drive the whole thing, I believe. I heard you about putting the tender out for like a year ahead. Why couldn't you put a tender out that said, give us a price if you do it this year, and give us a price for next year? And then if the next year's one comes in $100,000 cheaper, well, then that answers our question. But if it comes in $50,000 more,
Yeah, I'll leave that to the GM of infrastructure, because that's, I don't know how that works and how the tenders roll out either.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think anybody would give me a price for next year because they don't know what the prices are next year. Like, we did miss the county's tender. I believe they'll be awarding it at the March meeting for the Golden Place recycling. But at that point, we'll know what the prices are this year, and sometimes their contractors are favorable to us going on as an extra after it's been awarded, if council wants to think about it. My infrastructure heart opinion is that I would love to see that $45,000 in my structures reserve, because like we're talking around it, but after this year, if everything comes in on budget with the small amount of work that I'm doing, there's only, I think, $50,000 there, and that will need significant top-up to do any of the actual work that we're designing for. So I know it's only $45,000, but that's almost 100, and that would really help likely council next year. But at the end of the day, of course, it's your decision, and I will execute excellently.
Councillor McDonnell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was going to suggest we take that 45 and put it into the road structures, because we've got it down a little lower than I think we want it to be. At this point, I'm going to look to council, or to Deputy Mayor Lang, and say we practice what we preach. We sat at that roads committee, and we put the push on to try and get as many tenders out ahead of time, and I think it paid off. At the end of the day, I think it helped us. And I'm going to agree with you, the full length of the road would be, there is a critical spot in that road that is terrible. And I would say that's the 7th concession to the 5th. Maybe selfishly, that's the only stretch I have to drive with a gravity box, but I think at this point we're better to probably wait a year, get this tender out in November, because I think it's like your futures in corn. You know, about $35, $45 a ton cheaper next year. They're not, or the less that they're giving you if you tried to sell the next year's crop ahead of time. So at this point, I think we get this tender out early in the fall on next year's budget, because I think, I'm thinking back to that, getting it out earlier, getting hungry tenders coming back in, and we go from there, and that is what we more or less spent a year preaching to council and from our roads committee. But I do not want to see this road slip another year, because I think at that point, we're just facing inflationary costs and unfavorable damage to the subsurface of that road.
Okay, so in that regard, it looks like there would be majority to defer it, so, but do get those tenders out. And I don't know, maybe as early as possible, maybe we have a capital meeting for roads to make sure we're the first, because I think we were the first or the second this year, which I was quite happy with. Thank you, council and administration, for those capital ones. If we could do that again and be earlier, the better, because the more advanced that's the one advice that seemed to be like rooted in logic that can be counted upon, as opposed to everything else. General Manager McDonald?
We will be in better, through you, Mr. Mayor, to everyone, we will be in better position next year, but I want to say that I was in error because I forgot that we have transfers, and Mr. Jane is going to correct me on my reserve amount.
So the roads, bridges, and structure reserve, it wasn't too big of an error. I think our GM McDonald missed a zero. It's more like 500,000 and not 50,000.
Yeah, that is quite a bit of money, and I believe this is nearing the end of the conversation. I did want to leave time for council if there were questions, because I do believe in a next meeting. Like, it looks like most of the budget is fairly well set, but there might be more questions. I'm again look to Councillor Jaworski, and like going through those numbers, we might have some questions. What is the date? I don't have my calendar out for the next meeting. March 22nd. So perhaps if we could have questions to Mr. Jane by March 15th, that gives him and staff time to answer them, if we don't have them right now. Okay, we'll go Mr. Jane and then to Deputy Mayor Lang.
So, Council, I do want to say that we've now had extended conversations about budget. We've had an extended day-long meeting on the capital budget. We've now gone through operations. We've had a closed session meeting about staffing. As far as the reserves are concerned, there was a reserve report that was distributed to council back when the capital budget was presented, and any changes to the reserves have been presented as part of this presentation here. So at this point, we're February 22nd. We need to move forward on the 2023 budget. And administration's recommendation would be to agree in principle to the levy increase as well as the tax rate increase. I think really the crux of, as I'm understanding the conversation here, is whether or not to defer half of or the full of Second Line Road to the 2024 budget. I think if council can sort of agree in principle that that is the only change, and that council can sort of have a decision made on that in the next coming days, perhaps add another special meeting next week. But honestly, at this point, administration would like council to agree in principle to the tax levy increase and the tax rate increase, and then a bylaw can be brought forward at the next council meeting to adopt it pending any changes. But again, like, we've gone through some extended meetings on budget, and we really need to move forward on 2023. Thank you.
Okay, if I may take it, I'll pass it to you in a second. I would prefer, given what I want to look at a little bit more, I'd feel more comfortable with the next meeting. I think March 22nd is fine. It's not soon. I appreciate that, and I think next year will be a little sooner. So, like, I would strongly prefer some time to look over the numbers. Like, I don't think there's going to be massive questions. I just for my understanding, because like sometimes you have to feel comfortable. This has been a change, and I think some of us are still wrapping our heads around like where things tie into previous years. I might be on an island, and I'm willing to ask council that, but I saw Councillor McDonnell had a question, and then Deputy Mayor Lang.
I'm not opposed to waiting. I think we've been pretty clear that we agree with this mostly in essence. I'm not looking to wait till the 22nd either, though. I think we put this, I don't think it's a long discussion. I think it's maybe an hour at maximum. And I think I think we do it on the 6th at 6 PM ahead of our next council meeting. Because I think waiting until the 22nd is very unfair to the rest of to the finance department. At this point, I agree, you do have to get moving. But that being said, everyone sitting around this table, with the exception of the mayor, have been on this side of the table doing it, and you have the experience on the other side, the way it was written before. I always feel a lot more comfortable when I get time to go through the GLs. I know Councillor Jaworski is the same way, clearly you are, and I just have not had the time to do that, given that we got them over the weekend. So I'm gonna ask that we postpone, or I'll make a motion, I guess, that we bring this back for an hour-long meeting ahead of our March 6th regular council meeting.
There's just a committee of
And
adjustment.
start at
that's-
5.
Start at 5.
Do it every other meeting.
We would get, I'm favorable. I guess if there's 2, there's 3, then. So March 6th, you said? Start at 5? To approve, budget. Would it be a meeting to approve budget or just go through this final motion? Yes, that'd be great. So we will have a committee of the whole from 5 to 6 on Monday. And then and then after that, in the regular meeting, we'll have probably a resolution to approve it. Is that possible, given that like some small things might change? Like I'm thinking food cycle, or like little items like that could be discussed later. So if it was deferred from the March 6th month, if we're not confident, it would be March 20th.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if nothing changes at that meeting, and we essentially come back and say we're comfortable with it, just to,
Deputy Mayor Lang, and then Councillor Jaworski, sorry, I was looking over here trying to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and through you. And I had put my hand up right around the same time that Mr. Jans did, and he almost said word for word what I was going to say, and I'm going to reiterate it a certain amount. I have no interest in putting this off to the end of March, 0 interest, and I'll almost guarantee you what will happen is we have been at this hot and heavy for the last number of days. I know that because I've been on the phone with most of you for most of the day, one-on-one. If we put it off till the end of March, what's going to happen is we are all busy, we're going to go back to our normal lives, and we're not going to think about it till just before that meeting. And meanwhile, staff is kind of caught in the middle, and they can't get back to their regular jobs because they're still in budget mode. And I really want to be able to see them, they've put quite a bit of time and effort into this, and I think we have as well, and I don't want to see this dragged on for long. I don't have a problem waiting till the next council meeting, which is March 6th, which is what Mr. Jansen suggested, that we pass it on March 6th. So I want to see it passed on March 6th. If we need more time to discuss, I think we got to do it in between there now and then. And I have no, I just look at the amount of discussion we've had tonight. It was very minimal. We talk about $45,000 difference and whether or not we do Second Line Road, and there was not much else that anybody had strong feelings on, I don't think. I'll pass it in principle tonight if you want to, but if the rest of you want to wait a little bit and look at things a little more, I'm okay with that, but I want to see it done March 6th so the staff can go back to what they have to do, their normal jobs, the same as we can, because I know how much you guys put into this weekend because I was on the phone with most of you. So we've all basically lost Family Day weekend for the most part because we were busy with this, and I don't want to drag it out another month. Come on, guys.
Councillor McInnell?
so for us to pass it on the 6th, Kelly, what's our drop dead roughly, Ms. Compo, for getting things on the agenda or having an alteration done to something already on the agenda? Because I think personally, if we said, okay, today we've got a week, or we've got till next Friday to go through those GLs, is enough for everybody to get their comments to Mr. Jane ahead of that meeting, and then if it seems like there's going to be no issue, we just proceed with passing the budget at the next meeting this Friday.
I don't know if this Friday is possible, to be quite honest, but
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So if you wanted to have a resolution on the March 6th agenda to pass the budget, those reports are would be due by next Tuesday, the 28th, and Mr. Jane, I'm sure, would appreciate a little more lead time to prepare his report. So his report would be due to me by the 28th, excuse me.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so we're talking about, 2 days. And I'm not sure how much analysis you guys are going to be able to do over the next 2 days. As Deputy Mayor Lang said, there was minimal discussion tonight, right? Like, the discussion is whether or not we proceed with Second Line Road. I think over the next 15, 20 minutes, if council wishes, they can hash it out and then agree to this in principle, and then we can bring out a bylaw at the March 6th meeting. But at this point, I'm sure, look, like, I've spent an extended amount of time on this, but all of administration and all of the GMs have spent an extended amount of time on this, and we'd like to move forward with 2023.
and I might be firm in my stance that this is a very important document, so I don't want to rush it. I also don't want to drag my feet. So like the 2 days is okay. I think the second line issue is to defer it, so we don't have.
Second Line Road is to defer, 45,000 to go into general reserve for roads, bridges, and structures, bring it up to where the Roads Committee said it should be anyways, that's perfect. I think our problem right now is, as council, we feel we have a due diligence to do our job, and we don't feel we've had adequate time to do it because the GLs came so late. And it's not on anybody else, it's just we haven't had the time to go through them because we've been hashing this out, as well as reviewing a council agenda over 3-day span. I don't think any of us have gotten any sleep, including staff. I think we want a breather to be able to do our proper due diligence like we always do for a budget meeting, and that's just to review the GLs. I think if I don't think there's going to be any big major changes to the budget. I think you can approve it as is. Probably, I think we've just said we agree to it in essence. We just want the time to review the GLs before it is adopted and ratified. That's all we're asking for.
Yeah, Clerk Compo?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. If council is generally, in favor of what's been proposed tonight, and your biggest concern is that you'd like a little more time to review the GLs, I would suggest that perhaps Mr. Jane go ahead and prepare a report and bylaw for March 6th. And come March 6th, if you don't feel like you've had enough time to do that review, you always have the option to postpone. So, I mean, you could give the direction tonight to have him come back on the 6th with that for approval. And in that time, if you find that, there's something that you would like to change, or if you want to defer it, you have that option come March 3rd, or 6th, sorry.
Councilor Jaworski?
Thank you, through you, Mayor McDonald. But in terms of things that are urgent to be done, it's some of the capital items, right? Like, that's where the timing is the most critical. I mean, it seems to me like that's where we seem to be, I don't see much disagreement on that. So, I know in the past, staff has gone ahead and started doing certain RFP processes based on, direction, as opposed to like waiting till the budget has been formally approved. So, I don't think that's where the major, I don't see that as being a stumbling block to give us a bit of time so that we can, and I thank Councillor McDonnell for going first and explaining very well my feelings about the situation, is that in the past, we would have had more time to review the GLs to get comfortable. We've also, I think, the point about there's been not as much discussion, it's also because we haven't had as much chance to look at the detail that we would have had in the past. The budget is presented at a much higher level than what we would have seen in the past. So I'm still getting used to that, and I'm still not 100% comfortable with it, and I would not feel like I'm doing my job if I haven't had a chance to start, to look at it in more detail. And I'm not opposed to having it prepared for what the clerk has proposed, but again, I don't see anything that's stopping staff from moving forward on issuing RFPs. But I do have a question, though, in terms of like where are we actually ending in terms of the tax rate? Because, I mean, some of us had expressed some desires to bring it down a bit from what was, or our desires are a bit higher, I think, and lower than what was presented. So, I mean, in terms of that whole 45,000 that we might be saving, I mean, it's not a huge difference, but I would like to, like I had said, I'd like to get down to CPI.
So if I may, just to preface this, so from previously, I think we had Councillor Bougie said about 5%. Councillor McDonnell said not specific, but CPI at 6.8, probably comfortable with 6.9 to 7. Councillor Jaworski said no greater than 6.8, which is CPI. Deputy Mayor Lang said 7% do not go below, and this is all when we're talking tax rate. And then I believe I kind of hemmed and hawed and said between 7% and 9 I'd be comfortable with, as long as like it went towards like fuel, et cetera. And I think it's been done fairly well there. So we're at 6.96%, which is considerably above Councillor Bougie, right in where Councillor McDonnell was coming in, slightly above Councillor Jaworski, a little bit below Deputy Mayor and Mayor. So with that, I suppose, like I feel comfortable with it. Maybe a straw poll as to where we sit now, and because if we're satisfying, I guess it is by majority. So, and I don't know if we want to refine that number further this evening. I don't think we've kind of gone through the budget, and the questions are like to set up a bylaw. I think it's a great idea. Is this number comfortable? I guess I should go around before. Would you be comfortable with this, Deputy Mayor Lang?
I'm comfortable with it. I think Councillor Jaworski was thinking that the 45,000 was coming off that. I was thinking it was going into reserve, so it would stay on that.
Or somewhere in between.
I'll give you 20 grand.
Will you give me 20 grand?
Councillor Jaworski, would you be comfortable with this?
Well, I like my 6.8. I might not,
Okay, no, that's so close, but not exactly.
No.
Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Jain, what is the difference to get to 6.8? Is it roughly $45,000?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's $15,000.
Take $15,000 off that 45, and Councillor Lang gets what he wants, and
We are. I'm okay doing that too. We are also okay if we're allowed at a higher number. But if it's the will of the majority of council at 6.8, that's certainly what we can present. 6.8 then, and we'll keep 15,000 from the Sorry, I'm getting some. Can I just turn your?
Oh, I'm
microphone?
sorry.
Thank you. I was getting it back there. Yeah. So then we'll take 30,000 of that, put it to the bridge reserve. 15,000 offsets the taxation. That brings us to 6.8. Deputy Mayor Lang, we'll start with you. That's acceptable, obviously, because it's lower. Councillor Jaworski. I could say carried, but Councillor McDonnell, Councillor Bougie, you're the one that probably has some strong feelings. And I'll give you your opportunity to perhaps speak to the opposite side of this. Do you have thoughts on it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, I was hoping for a little lower, but based on everything we've gone through, I mean, I thought Ms. McDonald had mentioned some savings in certain areas, but I don't know if, I guess they were already reflected in there. So, I mean, it's the will of council, so I'll live with it.
Yeah, and I see a majority. So then, yeah, please prepare a bylaw and a staff report for the March 6th meeting. And then we'll get our questions within the next 2 days if we have that moment. And I guess you can always have a few after, but please keep in mind that it is hard, like the deadline for that staff report is next Tuesday. So please respect Mr. Jain's time, and Mr. Jain, please allow us some flexibility if we need, but I'll have my questions to you in fairly short order. Councillor Jaworski.
Just thank you, through Mayor McDonald. I'm hoping that I can get you my comments. I'm not expecting you to look at them on the weekend, but I don't think I can get them to you before the weekend. So I hope that's okay, that'll give you the Monday to look at them, or I'm hoping I don't think there'll be that many, but yeah, I need Friday to do this, so.
Mr. Jane?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will gladly work next weekend if it means pushing this through the line, so yes.
I think it was Deputy Mayor Lang, this is your haying season or something like that, I think, so. Councillor McDonell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is our his planting and harvest, I think, all mixed together, so. I will be very brief if I have any questions. I won't require much help, I doubt, but it was just, if I do have any, I will do my best to get them to you within the business week. And I will just say, I wish we could keep our budget down around like the 4 or 5%, but I honestly don't know if that would cover our fuel costs and everything else that's just gone up without doing any capital projects, so. I agree, Councillor Bougie, I'd love to see it down that low, I just don't think we can even realistically do it.
Yes, and I'd like to comment from also being on the administrative side. It was a hard budget to prepare, so I do appreciate all of administration because, yeah, the fuel cost to me it's bonkers. You see it with garbage and recycling, particularly in our fleet costs. So thank you everyone for your moments. Thank you, Mr. Jane. Thank you, all general managers. I will then find, yep. I believe I'm just calling adjournment. Is that correct? I don't think I have.
Yep, that's all you got.
Yep, perfect. I'm so accustomed to closed session recently that I started looking for papers. So moved by Stephanie Jaworski, seconded by Stan McDonnell. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry adjourn to the call of the chair at 9:24 p.m. All those in favor? Any if opposed? Seeing none? Carried. Thank you very much, and thank you to everybody for the debate.